NPR's Giles Snyder reports this is the first time in history that a former U.S. president will face criminal charges.
The former president is expected to turn himself in at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Trump's arraignment is scheduled for 2:15 p.m. Eastern. The criminal charges against him will be unsealed for the first time. They stem from an investigation into hush money paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump denies any criminal wrongdoing and is expected to plead not guilty. Following his court appearance, Trump is scheduled to return to Florida to speak at an event at his Mar-a-Lago home tonight. Giles Snyder, NPR News.
Another round of severe weather could hit parts of the Midwestern and southern U.S. today and tomorrow. NPR's Kristen Wright reports several regions devastated by deadly tornadoes last week are preparing for more dangerous storms.
The latest threat of tornadoes and severe storms covers a wide area, including Iowa, Illinois, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. Large hail and high winds are expected. National Weather Service meteorologist Marty Rausch says some tornadoes could form in the middle of the night while people are sleeping and touch down for a while.
Stays on the ground for a long distance, many miles, versus a lot of tornadoes that just dip down to the ground for, say, a mile or two, cause some damage, and then come back up.
In the northern plains, current forecasts show April snowstorms could break snowfall records. Kristen Wright, NPR News.
The head of the Environmental Protection Agency is hitting the road today to tout the agency's $6.5 billion investment in community drinking water infrastructure. EPA Administrator Michael Regan will make a stop in Rockford, Illinois, as NPR's Eric McDaniel reports.
State, local, and tribal governments will, for the second year in a row, have billions of dollars in extra money to invest in drinking water thanks to the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law. $3 billion of that will go directly to addressing lead service lines. And the EPA is using new data to target the funds based on where in the country the biggest lead problems are. All told, Congress has set aside $15 billion to fix lead water lines. But the president says more is still needed to end the problem by the end of the decade. The Biden administration says drinking water utilities will need $625 billion in investment over the next 20 years. Eric McDaniel, NPR News, Washington.
In college basketball, UConn won the NCAA championship last night after beating San Diego State 76-59. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 150 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. As we just heard, the EPA is sending money to improve water quality, and New England will see $57 million to improve its water quality. That money can be applied to sewer projects and others. Michaela Savitt with New England News Collaborative has more.
Federal officials say the money will help to upgrade wastewater and stormwater systems across the region. The EPA says Connecticut will receive $9 million to protect drinking water, limit the PFAS forever chemicals in water, and build resilience against climate change. Other New England states are also getting money. $25 million is slated for Massachusetts. And New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, and Vermont are also getting millions for upgrades. The EPA has provided low-cost financing to states for water upgrade projects for decades. The money is part of the agency's Clean Water State Revolving Fund. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Michaela Savitt.
And just a program note on what's going to happen later today. It is Tuesday, so Boston Public Radio with Jim and Marjorie is live at the Boston Public Library today. The show will extend into the 2 o'clock hour so that GBH can bring you coverage of the arraignment of President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, that is. They'll have a number of legal experts and scholars with an analysis of the proceedings. And, of course, they'll also want to hear from you. So do stick around. It's a historic day. Red Sox Pirates play Game 2 of their 3-game series at Fenway tonight. Celtics and Philly for a game against the 76ers. We are at 54 degrees in Boston right now.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Zoom. Zoom One is designed for AI-powered collaboration across phone, video, messaging, whiteboards, and work apps, keeping global teams connected. One platform to connect. Zoom One.
I'm Henry Santoro, GBH News 89.7.
He is
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and every Friday. And we are also streaming on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. And Jim Browdy has returned from his investigative reporting work down at Mar-a-Lago, where you were reporting from a bridge overlooking the beautiful manse of the former president.
Well, I have to say it was quite an allure. I was staying actually at a common friend of ours' place, about a mile or so away. I drove by Mar-a-Lago, I would say on average 2 times a day. Don't ask me why. See what the crowds were like, to see if there's any activity. And I have to say it was pretty, I mean, you sort of feel in an odd way you're a little bit part of history. The only downside, which I failed to tell you till now, is one of the times when I was driving by Mar-a-Lago in a friend's car, I did rear end a pickup truck in front of me. That was unfortunate.
Oh, Jim.
Especially since it wasn't my car.
Oh,
other than that...
Are you serious?
I'm totally serious.
Oh, my God. You crashed somebody else's car?
I wouldn't say crashed. I would say I caused a little bit of damage to the front end.
This is the 3rd time since I've known you that you've been married to someone.
That was like 30 years ago.
That was no, it wasn't. It was less than that. It was on the Southeast Expressway.
Right, it was like 30 years ago on 93 North.
That's right. You were on your cell phone then. I suspect you might have been on your cell
actually,
phone now. Okay,
not,
that's the story. He's sticking to it.
In any case, I am back.
Okay, you're back.
It was, and the crowds were quite small, which there's a great line from Michael Cohen, which we actually have. He was on MSNBC talking about the crowds outside Trump Tower yesterday when Donald Trump did fly from Palm Beach to New York City. And Cohen, the former fixer for the president, never misses an opportunity to poke him. Here's what Cohen had to say.
That was, I don't know, looked like a bake sale over at a high school football game.
Do you think he's lost some of that heat?
Oh, I believe he lost a lot of the heat. I truly don't believe that the popularity of Donald Trump is where it was 6 months ago or a year ago.
So let me state what everybody knows. As you just heard, 2:15 today, the former president will be arrested and arraigned on criminal charges for the first time in our nation's history. And it's been said so many times. Let me repeat it. For the first time in our nation's history. But to me, the ultimate irony, Trump, our reality TV president, is being denied his reality TV moment. It's not fair to say denied. His own lawyers asked that there not be media access. The judge in Manhattan basically agreed. He's granted limited media access. Just 5 news photographers will be allowed in the courtroom to take still photographs. They have to leave once the arraignment actually begins. TV cameras and microphones are not allowed in the courtroom, which is an outrage. We're going to talk about it. But in the hallways where he will surrender, reporters can't have their phones or computers either in the courtroom or in overflow rooms in the building. So on this historic day, how do you feel about being shut out of one of the most important news stories of the century? Again, no cameras, no recording, no broadcast of sound. Or are you okay with the news coming out a little slower than it would if reporters were able to live tweet the arraignment? 877-301-8970. The reason I'm stuttering is I am thoroughly and completely disgusted by this judge's decision to say there is not legitimate public interest in the arraignment of a former president of the United States. And by the way, I wasn't aware of this, even though I practiced in this very courtroom many decades ago, this very courthouse at, I think it's 100 Center Street, wherever it is.
That's right.
In Lower Manhattan.
It was legendary.
No, I was far from legendary, but I was there nevertheless as a law student when you were allowed to do representation. New York, which really shocks me, I didn't know till a few days ago, has among the most restrictive laws in the country, along with Washington, D.C., about televising proceedings. And the notion that in 2023, the American people will not be able to see, if they choose, the arraignment of a former president in, let me repeat, a public courtroom is unbelievable. So if you're not going to have cameras, at least you'll have audio of the proceeding. Well, actually, no, you will not have audio of the proceeding. Well, at least you'll have tweets from the reporters in the courtroom. No, you won't. What's your reaction to this?
You know, I think it's outrageous. I mean, I spent most of my life as a reporter. The idea that the government is becoming more and more ready to deny the citizens of the United States of America access to public events like courts. I mean, you're supposed to be able to, except for like a kid court, juvenile court, something like that, and that's understandable because it's children. But if you can't go, they should have cameras in the federal courthouses. Whitey Bulger, that was a case that was tremendous public interest in Boston. We couldn't see that. Tsarnaev, the marathon bomber. You couldn't see that. It's disgraceful. I mean, you had to actually physically go there, which most people are not able to do. And we've had cameras in state courthouses for quite some time, and I think that it's been a wonderful thing to be able to see courts in action. We all remember way back when it was kind of a novelty when the O.J. Simpson trial was televised. Yeah. But I mean, it's horrible. You're not going to be able to see you're not even going to get a still photograph, by the way I understand it, of the former president of the United States standing at the defendant's docket. I don't think we're even going to get that.
Pre-arraignment that they're allowed to take photographs.
So it's outrageous. I don't see there's any justification. But you pointed out to me, I didn't know this, that New York State has some of the worst
I didn't know it myself.
laws
I just said
about cameras in the courtroom. It's just outrageous. And frankly, it's outrageous that the Supreme Court does not have cameras in their courtroom either.
Well, it's all, and again, even though the law is very strict, as Marjorie and I were just saying in New York State, a judge has the discretion to allow media access more than 5 still photographers. And he was Judge Merchan, who is widely praised as a very fair judge, except by Donald Trump, who not only attacked the judge, but attacked the judge's wife
I don't
as
think
a
that's a good
Trump-hating
idea.
person.
So appearing before the judge, attack him and attack the wife.
So we want to know essentially here, one, what do you think about the public essentially not having access to the courtroom? What do you think about the fact that I'm sure you've read or heard the president will be fingerprinted, he will not be handcuffed, there will not be a mugshot, even though other criminal defendants would get that kind of treatment. And also, this is totally typical, other than leaked reports, Michael Iskoff saying there are going to be 30-some felony charges, neither we nor the defendant himself, that being Donald Trump, will know what the charges are until immediately prior to this arraignment, and we will hear them, I guess. We won't hear them. We'll hear about them sometime after the arraignment in the 2 o'clock hour. Number's 877-301-8970.
Just one last thing before we get to the calls and texts. My understanding is that reporters are not going to be able to bring laptops or even...
I just said that.
Yeah.
Just their notepad.
So, right. And unless you are really good at shorthand, for accuracy's sake...
That's a great point.
It is really hard to write everything down. You'd have to be a shorthand taker, which most of us aren't. You can do it much faster on your laptop, and that's for accuracy's sake very important, and I guess they don't care about that either.
Let me ask you, I'll ask Judge Gertner this in the 1 o'clock hour, but maybe you have a thought. Even if the judge has decided for whatever, I think, indefensible reason, he doesn't want any live broadcast of video or sound, why not allow reporters to record the sound so that at least there is total accuracy, particularly, as Maggie Haberman said from the New York Times, since this is a man who is a prolific liar about everything that's happened in his life.
I think it's a huge mistake.
Why not ensure
he's getting special treatment and
that we have the record?
Big mistake.
877-301-8970. Are you as upset about this as it appears we are, or are you trying to steer away from the Trump coverage to begin with? Peter Nakar, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for joining us. Hi.
Good morning. I think you guys just need to, have another cup of coffee and relax. I agree it is it's a little much that he gets special treatment and that First Amendment rights, freedom of speech are being trampled on. All that said, I want to suck all the air out of the balloon and extinguish the flame that is going to be the circus around this. We'll all get it. It'll come out eventually. We just need to be patient about it, and that's it. I don't want this sucking up all of the airwaves and all of the attention of everybody.
Well, I actually do, Peter, with all due respect, I do. And while I don't want, I think I'm with you on half of this, I don't want the performance art of Donald Trump to get a huge amount of coverage. I do want the legal proceedings to get intense coverage, and courtrooms are public places in America. It seems, let me just, if I can finish, Peter, and it seems to me that if I choose, I have an interest in seeing that proceeding against the former president. And again, I want people to watch, but go ahead, Peter.
Now, all fair point, and I agree with you on that notion. It is the right thing. They should allow. I grew up in New York. I know that the courts there are kind of strict on a lot of matters.
I'd forgotten.
They do a lot of wonky things.
Yeah.
But that all said, you know what? what's going to happen is going to happen, and we'll get there. We've got to be patient.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
You know, several of the texters, Jim, are concerned about your rear-ending a car down by Mar-a-Lago.
It's a pickup truck.
A pickup truck in another friend's car. But mostly they're glad that you were in a friend's car as opposed to the Tesla la.
Well, actually, I would have preferred. I was rather embarrassed. I'd been in Florida for about an hour when I rear-ended somebody.
I did that once. My car was in the shop. I brought a friend of mine from the Herald. She let me have her car, and some guy plowed into me and my kids in her car, taking a left turn into.
You know what made me feel worse?
McDonald's.
How nice the guy was about it. Yeah, you really want him to be a little bit angry, but he was pathetically nice. 877-301-8970. If you stop, I say this to you in different contexts. Before we get back to the calls. It just seems like another day in the life. It is not another day.
Well, it's not.
And even if you think the charges in this case are overblown, he is a democratically elected, small d, some say capital D, elected district attorney who is bringing criminal charges against the former president, who is likely to have other criminal charges brought against him as well. I mean, this is huge.
Well, I mean, we talked about this yesterday, about people, blaming the media for constantly covering Trump. You have to do it because he's the leading candidate for the Republican nomination, and because this is the first former president. This is the first time that has happened. But sadly, to Peter's point, it's going to be nonstop Trump from here on out. I mean, it really is.
So what
we're
do you do?
We're going to have running for his election, and then we're going to have the Georgia case, and then we're going to have, I think, the Mar-a-Lago case. The Washington Post has done some more reporting about how make it look really intentional, that he was intentionally obstructing justice, knew where these classified documents were, and actively had people hide them for him. So that case, so it's going to be nonstop.
Plus January 6th, obviously.
I mean, he could be one of those people beyond the grave, Jim. He could be 6 feet under it, and we'll still be talking about it.
Here's a journalistic question for you.
What?
Reportedly, unless there's a gag order, which experts say there will not be, again, we'll discuss that with Judge Gertner later in the show, Trump's supposed to hold a press conference tonight at 8:15 in Mar-a-Lago.
He's going to give a talk,
That is going to be littered with lies. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me to be responsible. You do one or two things. I don't think you can not cover this, as a lot of people would like to do, saying let's ignore Trump, because, again, this case is proceeding. You clearly have to do live fact-checking. Do you not? I mean, you have to do fact-checking on the spot, or else, once again, it's giving him a unilateral access to the American people with a pack of lies.
Where's a very good place to go, either to the Washington Post or the New York Times. Usually they cover hearings live, and then the fact-checking is done by the reporters live. I don't know if they'll do that tonight. I hope they do, because I've not seen live fact-checking on television. Have you?
Well, I mostly watch CNN. Yeah, they do. They attempted
when he's giving a talk. I mean, if he's giving a talk, I don't know. It's hard to do. They're going to have the chyrons underneath that saying he's lying again. He's lying again. He's lying again.
Well, I think they're going to say in almost real time exactly what happened in the courthouse and exactly what the facts are, as compared to how he describes.
But to the point you made, though, where is our record of it? Where is the sound of it? That's kind of one of the...
Well, there'll be a transcript, but the written word, which most people are not going to read, is not the same as hearing the voices of the players.
There'll be a court reporter.
Exactly.
Kim from Foxborough.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have to say I agree that there shouldn't be cameras. I think it will be...
Whoops.
Oh, we lost Kim.
We didn't hang up on Kim.
Actually, we just lost 3 people. Maybe there's something wrong with the phones, Jim.
I don't know. But Kim, our apologies. There's one open line. If you want to call back really quickly, we'll try to get back to you. 877-301-8970. I think it's really good what you did a minute ago.
What did I do?
For those who don't think it's a big deal that there are no cameras in the courtroom, beyond the fact in and of itself it is a public courtroom, it is part of a pattern we discussed, including here in Massachusetts, where we have the worst public record laws in the United States of America. It's part of a trend that is unhealthy.
How many times, this is not a courtroom, but how many times have we talked about the MBTA? They're shutting down or having slow zones, but they're not going to tell you where the slow zones are or how long they're going to be there. They just keep it all under wraps. Like they've been keeping it secret for years. The State House, they don't like the idea of having their records open. Maura Healey campaigned on being more transparent. Well, so far, she's not kept that pledge to be more transparent.
She says she is.
I guess the question is, if it's not involving someone's personal life, or like when they go into executive session in town meetings, you have to have reasons. Now, I'm not saying they don't abuse
personnel matters,
because they do.
Yeah.
But And the Department of Children and Families, they do this all the time. They say we can't discuss an ongoing investigation. Well, yes, they can. They just have to be careful in how they discuss it, and they hide behind that blanket excuse, and so we have no idea what's going on.
Speaking of Healy, is the governor with us a week from today, Jamie? Hello? Yes. Week from today, Governor Healy will join us at the library. Robert and Lowell, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for your call. Hi.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I think I'm going to echo at least one of the previous callers that,
Sure.
Well, I do support cameras in the courtroom, but I think that judges should always have some discretion, and I think in this case it might be a wise exercise of discretion not to turn this because I think all it does is it inflames what's already a highly inflamed, really terrible. It's a terrible situation with. I mean, you've got a defendant going around claiming the judge doesn't like me. Sounds like a teenager coming home to his parents with a bad grade in his report card. I mean, I just think there's so much negativity going on with all of this. I just think it's better to let cooler heads prevail. We're going to find out a lot about what happened to court anyway, and I think that the judge has possibly made a good decision.
Well, Robert, let me tell you, in addition to the reasons why I totally disagree with the judge and you, two possible extremes will occur. One, Trump will actually act like a grown-up for a change, which I think is really instructive, particularly for young people, that even a brash serial liar and bully like Donald Trump knows he has to behave in front of a court, which is a plus. Or if he performs like he does everywhere else, then we get to see how a judge deals with a defendant, a prominent defendant, when he or she misbehaves. See, my view is almost the exact opposite of yours. The more outrageous the case is, the more we have an obligation, if we choose to broadcast it and see it. And I hear you, Robert. You may be in the majority, but not on today on this show. Robert, thanks for the call.
You know, we just get this New York Times story, and also our staff got us a Ben Collins NBC story about the protests outside, and they have been. They're not really characterizing them size-wise, but they are saying that they're demonstrators from both sides got there hours before Trump was supposed to show up. Marjorie Taylor Greene is on hand. Apparently, a pro-Trump guy handed out all these whistles, but this has backfired because the whistles, according to Ben Collins at NBC, are drowning out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the reporter said he was pretty close to her. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, is the person that thinks all Democrats are, or not all, but she thinks most Democrats are in favor of pedophilia, and she's kind of a conspiracy theorist. The police are separating the anti-Trump and the pro-Trump demonstrators outside the courthouse, and the demonstrations so far have been largely peaceful.
This is one of the things we learned, by the way. NPR has already answered the question I posed about his remarks, Trump's tonight at 8:15. Yep. NPR will not air Trump's remarks. Quote, this is from the executive editor, Terry Samuel. Given all that we've learned covering the Trump presidency, we're going to focus on the consequential and stay away from the showmanship. It comes down to a single question for us. How much value added do we deliver to the audience, having learned a lot about these events on the go? They fear that it'll be spreading false information. Now, unlike the court proceeding, which is legal proceeding, where I think bringing it live makes sense, this is the wise way to go. Don't cover it live. And then if there's news in that 8:15 proceeding or speech or talk or whatever it is, then you are free to select from it and show it to your viewers and provide it for your listeners. 877-301-8970. Speaking of crowds, by the way, I don't know if you, other than yesterday when Trump left Mar-a-Lago, where I happened not to have been outside, where the crowds were decent, there were under a dozen people every single time I drove by in the preceding 3 days. So I sort of agree with Michael Cohen. It appears that, at least in terms of fervor, it's on the wane. But did you see the poll, the Reuters poll this morning, where his numbers are up 11 points higher over DeSantis than they were 2 weeks ago, which one has to assume relates to this?
Yeah, I don't think he can win again.
Well, we shall see.
It's not 2016 anymore, and the reasons a lot of people voted for him in 2016 don't really work anymore because what he said he was going to do, he didn't do. Anyway, we are talking about the arraignment today of the former President of the United States, Donald Trump. We're going to be talking about it for a few more minutes. And then we're going to talk about sports with Tony Casey. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, excuse me, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on YouTube.com/GBH News and Facebook.com/GBH News.
It's the first criminal charge against a former U.S. president.
The Manhattan District Attorney handed down a criminal indictment against Trump last week.
He was investigated for covering up a payment to an adult film star.
What's in the indictment?
It remains under seal until Trump appears before the judge.
What are the implications?
One never knows where this will bounce, but I think we're in untested waters.
NPR will cover the proceedings and provide post-analysis. Join us tonight at 9 here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum combines professional development and a comprehensive pre-K and K curriculum designed to build self-regulation skills. Learn more at toolsofthemind.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we'll be here till 3 today, not just 2. Our intention, 2 to 3, was to bring you live coverage of the arraignment of Donald Trump, first president to ever be criminally charged. We can't bring it to you live because Manhattan Judge Juan Merchan decided to limit media access to this historic moment in our nation's history in a public courtroom. And Marjorie and I are pretty upset about it. We want to know if you are. Our callers so far seem not to be. Our number is 877-301-8970.
Listen to this text. I am very disappointed that there will be no cameras. I have waited for this day for what feels like a lifetime.
You know, for a lot of the people who are either calling or texting saying they don't care, they're not into this, don't watch. I mean, you're not forced to watch.
No.
I believe public courtrooms should be forced to make them accessible to people who can't travel to be physically in them. I don't even know.
Did you see the text from Michelle and Josh?
Nope.
From Tuscany, Jim?
Nope.
Buongiorno, Jim and Marjorie. My husband and I are in Tuscany making a delicious dinner with amazing fresh produce while sipping wine and listening to you because we couldn't imagine this historic day without you. Thank you, Michelle and Josh. They're normally from Vermont, but they are currently in Tuscany. There you go. We're international, Jim.
Well, yeah, I guess we are. I wish we were international, actually. Maria and Peabody, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, with regard to the judge, at some point could lift the ban and allow the cameras into the courtroom. I think initially, with an arraignment, I think some of your other callers were saying, an arraignment essentially, except for the mere fact that this is a former president, is typically boring.
Yeah.
You just go in and you can even waive the reading. You
Sure.
can just say not guilty. We might know what the charges are, but we're not going to know a whole lot by this arraignment. So I do agree with you that cameras, I think, should always be in the courtrooms except for like private matters with like juveniles. But I don't think an arraignment is the most, I think the trial or whatever the case ends up being would be definitely, something I'd want to see. But I mean, an arraignment is like whatever. We learn what he's charged with and then we deal with it.
Well, by the way, again, my experience with arraignments for the most part are like yours. You have much more than I, that they're generally not that interesting. But again, my position is you want to watch, you should have that option. You raised a point, Maria, that I wish we had raised. You make a very good point, is while the judge at the moment is saying no, at least to today in the arraignment, there's no indication he will shift his position down the line. But when this trial begins, obviously media outlets are going to make the same motions that the trial be broadcast, or at least on radio, if not on television. He obviously has the ability to grant access then, like you said, right?
Yes, he most certainly does. And I think he could get an idea today also, how crazy is this going to be? And is that something I would, want to do?
Maria, thank you for your thoughts. We appreciate them. 877-301-8970. You're just tuning in. No camera, no audio, no phones, no computers, notepads is what you're allowed to bring in. In terms of visuals, 5 photographers are allowed in the courtroom prior to the arraignment to take still photographs, and then they are done. They're not allowed to take photographs once the arraignment begins.
Let's go to Brady in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Brady.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Pleasure as always.
Thank you.
I'm back to rage renovating my house, as you might remember from the election.
Actually, I do. Yeah,
rage renovating. I love it.
Yeah. I am extraordinarily disappointed in this decision because with Trump, the only way to have him not control the dialogue with his sycophant bootlicker followers is a video record that shows how he was treated.
I agree.
That they can see. Otherwise, it's just going to be all lies. It'll be lies anyway, but there will be more if they can't see it.
No, I agree. And while the prosecutor, the Manhattan District Attorney Bragg, is going to do his own press conference this afternoon, he's not going to do a running commentary day after day after day, and Trump and his sycophants are. And it would be nice to have the record available to the public. Now, I'm sure somebody listening is saying, well, there'll be a transcript, and we can always read that. How many people are going to read a written transcript of this proceeding as compared to people who on television or the radio may actually hear it? So I think you said it beautifully, Brady. Good luck with the roof. Thank you very much for the call.
You know, we always talk about the lack of protest. A couple of people have texted about the Tennessee protest by the kids, about the guns, and saying we're not covering that. No, you're not covering that at that particular moment. But
is this the legislature? Is that at the legislature state house? Yeah.
They want tougher gun laws, and the Republicans there are trying to get rid of the Democrats that are siding with these students. But there's a pretty significant number of kids out there protesting for tougher gun laws at the State House after, of course, the shooting in Nashville last week that killed 3 9-year-olds and 3 grown-ups in the Christian school. What are you laughing at?
Obviously, I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because only when you mention the protest, I'm hearkening back to the sound we played at the top of the show. Michael Cohen at MSNBC saying, it looks like a bake sale out there, a high school bake sale.
You know, we should play that again. You know why?
Sure, do it.
Because I love to listen to his accent. I mean, what would you say? Is this a Queens accent, Brooklyn accent?
Well, by the way, I mean, what also is interesting about this is how everybody turns at the end of the day when Trump screws you. I mean, everybody turns. This guy was his fixer. This guy was his most loyal, sycophantic fixer, and he's now the chief witness against them.
Trump turned his back on his sycophantic fixer. As he's turned his back on almost everybody, that's another thing. You don't want to get friendly with this guy because look how he treats his friends. Mike from North Carolina says, Jim, take a breath. If you maintain this level of outrage, you're going to have an aneurysm. This is going to take a long time. And Mike is right. This is going to take a long time. But here's Michael Cohen with the New York City accent on MSNBC, The Beat, on Trump's rally outside Trump Tower. Here he is.
That was, I don't know, looked like a bake sale over at a high school football game.
Do you think he's lost some of that heat?
Oh, I believe he lost a lot of the heat. I truly don't believe that the popularity of Donald Trump is where it was 6 months ago or a year ago.
Yeah, I really like reflecting on what we read a few minutes ago, that NPR has decided not to carry live Trump's statement, press conference, whatever it is, from Mar-a-Lago tonight at 8:15, and rather after the fact, if news is made, they will report it. Lee in Westboro, welcome to the show. Hi.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Sure.
The argument that this will cause a lot of controversy if it's publicized and we can see it live and people get upset is the argument that, okay, let the right wing win. If they threaten violence, if they threaten upset, then what they do is they trample on democracy and we let them do it. We can't do that. We have to always be vigilant. We have to always speak back. We've got to speak up.
I love that, Lee. That was great. Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
Here's a very perspective from, I think it's Zoomera on YouTube. Truth isn't going to matter. The only thing that will matter is who can control the narrative, who has the best spin, the most bots on social media to push their messaging through the trial. You know,
maybe today, Zoomera is right. How about the January 6th committee? Maybe they didn't change a lot of minds now, but for the sake of history, Don't you think the documentation they did, including the extensive video, is going to
because-
matter forever? I do.
Because Trump people didn't see it.
Well, Trump
They
people are
saw-
going to be dead, and so
they
is Trump
saw
at some point.
Tucker Carlson's version of what happened there. We have some sound of Marjorie Taylor Greene outside the courthouse. Her staff was telling us.
Do we have to? I am so. Did you discuss yesterday I'm a huge Leslie Stahl fan.
Mhm.
Interviewed her in Greater Boston. That was the most disgraceful 13 minutes of television when she said. You've said the Democrats are all pedophiles. If you apologize, no, they are. They groom people.
Yeah.
They sexualize people.
Well, she was
And
talking
Leslie
about
Stahl-
transgender,
I know,
dealing with medical issues involving
she made a
transgender
face,
kids as sexualizing.
Stahl made a face in response, as opposed to drilling down, even if it took the whole 13 minutes. The whole thing, I am totally with people who say she shouldn't have been given the platform. And if you give her the platform, you have to nail her. And she didn't.
She's quite a CrossFitter, Jim, as we also saw on 60 Minutes.
You know what she also said, by the way? I'm sorry. I know this is not our topic.
You just said you didn't want to talk about it.
She introduced Marjorie Taylor Greene, her own words, editorial decision, as smart and fearless. Would you ever think of that first word when it relates to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
No.
That was
I don't think I
Leslie
would.
Stahl's description
Shameless
of this
would be
insurrectionist
a more
QAnon person.
accurate. When she was at the
That's
State of the Union with the white coat on and running around with the white balloon
Liar.
all day long, and calling the president a liar. Craig in Fall River.
Hey, Craig.
Thank you for calling.
Hey guys, although I agree with you 100% that cameras should be allowed, Marjorie, I'm a little surprised at you. Judges do this all the time. I'm a reporter like you, started at the Durfee Hilltop.
Oh my goodness! At
And-
the Durfee Hilltop.
Yeah.
You're ahead of me. I was never at the Durfee Hilltop.
But go ahead.
I thought you were.
No,
Oh,
Fall River
okay.
Herald News.
But yeah, no, I mean in high school though. Yeah, I was at the Fall River Herald News too. It's just that judges do this all the time. They make the rules, and although I agree, especially in Massachusetts, it's outrageous. This is nothing new. I've been, I'm sure you've been at murder trials where, there's no camera or whatever, for whatever reason.
Well,
And,
now though in Massachusetts, Craig, we do allow cameras in the courtroom, and they have to make an affirmative decision not to have cameras in the courtroom. 'cause
Right, the
in murder
default is open
yeah,
as opposed
so
to
the murder
closed.
trials and are televised if there's interest in it.
But I'm not sure what New York laws are. But it's
They're
not
different.
a surprising thing that this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you guys have a lot of outrage, and I agree with that outrage. It's just, this isn't not a surprising decision that a judge would say, no, you're not coming in. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
you're probably right that it's not
they rule-
surprising. Doesn't mean it's defensible. Craig, thank you for the call. Let me repeat, because maybe you didn't hear it earlier. We learned in the last 24 hours, New York State and Washington, D.C. have some of the most restrictive laws about media access. As Marjorie said a minute ago, the default is no access vis-a-vis cameras and audio transmission or recording, but a judge, like Merchan in this case, has the ability to declare that the courtroom is open.
You wonder if it's
he chose not to.
You wonder if it's Democrats.
What do you mean?
Well, New York's a very Democratic state, and so is Massachusetts. We have lousy open meeting laws here. I mean, maybe there's something to. We have very little transparency at the State House. Maybe it's Democrats. Florida, of all places, is changing some under DeSantis, but it's one of the easiest places to get records.
Texas, too,
they're
by the
much more open, and those are both certainly.
Red
Texas
states.
is a red state, and I guess Florida is a red state at this point. No, so maybe it's the Democrats, Jim. You can blame them. Anyway, we are moving on. We're going to talk.
We should say, we're moving on. We're spending essentially off and on the whole show
That's
up
right.
until 3 o'clock talking about this with a few breaks here and there.
But up next, we are going to talk with NBC Sports Trini Casey. We're going to talk about the NCAA, the men's tournament, the women's tournament, and kind of a dust-up at the women's tournament, and also Saudi Arabian-sponsored golf. She's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Next time on The World, pandemic isolation delayed the emotional development of some kids, especially kids from new immigrant families.
And what do you do if you feel angry?
Teachers and mental health professionals are giving these preschoolers some tools to process their emotions,
If you feel very angry, you can sit down and look in the mirror.
helping at-risk children cope with emotional stress. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Hanover Theater, presenting the Moth Mainstage, an event that celebrates the diversity and commonality of the human experience through true live storytelling. April 13th at the Hanover Theater. Tickets at thehanovertheater.org. And Johnson & Wales University, committed to creating impact inside and outside of the classroom with internships, hands-on learning, and faculty who are industry experts. You can explore more at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. We will not end today at 2. We will end at 3 to bring you whatever we learn about the arraignment of Donald Trump as soon as we learn it. We're joined now at the BPL by Trenny Casey, who I believe won $380 last night. She's an anchor.
333.
Whatever. She's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Hey there, Trenny. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Trenny. So Jim thought it was a lousy game. I really enjoyed watching last night's UConn.
You guys stayed up and watched the game?
I watched the first half.
I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And I saw they gave a big award to Dave Gavitt, who used to be at Providence College, for getting the NCAA together. And that's, I know a lot of people that went to Providence College, so that was kind of nice.
PC, good rival of my alma mater, Marquette.
That's right.
Yes.
All those Catholic schools.
All those Catholic
play
schools
good
all
basketball.
together.
What's good about a game where one team doesn't score for 11 minutes in a national championship game?
Because they're just young and they're so talented, and I just love to watch. I love to watch basketball.
Did you watch the women's? So I had a little stomach bug coming off of my trip to New York with my niece. So I actually went to bed at like 8:30 last night. But I watched the women's national championship game on Sunday afternoon. That too was a blowout, but it got good in the second half. So Iowa was down like 20 at halftime, and that's about when I turned it on after I was watching some baseball. And watching Iowa storm back and then LSU take the lead and win the national title. Do you know that 9.9 million people watched the women's national title game?
Well, Charlie Baker.
It was more than 9 Thursday night football games this year.
Charlie Baker, our former governor, who's now the president of the NCAA, mentioned that.
Here it is.
Yeah, we had the sound of that.
Well, here he is on Meet the Press talking about separate TV rights deal for women's sports. Here he is.
I think this is definitely something that's on our radar. The program, I think, is at exactly the right time, peaking here because the contract is up. We do have an opportunity to put it out separately, and we're going to work really hard to make sure that those student athletes, those schools, those programs get what I would describe as what they should get.
There's Charlie Baker.
There's Charlie Baker. He didn't smile a lot on Meet the Press. I wanted him to smile, but he didn't. But anyway, so talk about this dust-up now in this game between Caitlin Clark, who's this superstar from Iowa, and this Angel Reese.
So what happened? So in the Final Four game that Iowa played against Louisville, Caitlin Clark hit another three-pointer. She had 41 points.
Yeah, 41
against Louisville. She had
two games in a row.
Triple-double, unbelievable game. But at one point, she waved like her hand in front of her face as a "you can't see me, you can't stop me," and she did it to like a freshman player on Louisville. I didn't love it. I don't love that kind of stuff.
I didn't like it either.
And so she does that to a freshman, and then they go on to crush Louisville. They get into the national championship game, and Angel Reese is known for being outspoken. She is known for her big, like fake, flashy eyelashes.
I loved it.
And like she wears like the one leg sleeve, and she's got the long flowing hair. And she's known for being a trash talker. And I didn't love this either. So in the waning moments of the national title game with LSU comfortably in the lead, she did the same thing to Caitlin Clark that Caitlin Clark did to this girl. She waved her hand in front of her face, and then she kept getting up in her face and pointing. And if you're not watching on YouTube, I'm pointing to my ring finger, showing we're going to get the ring, you're not. I don't like any of it.
I don't either.
Because I just don't think it's necessary. And to me, it's not male, it's not female, it's not black, it's not white. I don't like when Travis Kelce did it. I rooted against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl because I don't like how Travis Kelce boasts and puffs his chest and makes it about himself. I like how Patrick Mahomes handles himself. I don't like how Grant Williams on the Celtics makes it about him and is Mr. Superman and talks in a Batman voice and does all this stuff. Just play the game. And I don't mind celebrations.
Dan Shaughnessy wrote about that in the Globe
Can we play? Let's stay on the topic.
Okay, let's Here's sound from
Reese
Angel
afterwards.
Reese.
You know, Trenny just said it isn't about race, isn't about that sort of thing. She seems to be intimating that it may be. Here she is.
I think in some cases it
Here
is.
she is, speaking to her critics.
I don't fit the narrative. I don't fit in the box that y'all want me to be in. I'm too hood. I'm too ghetto. Y'all told me that all year. But when other people do it, y'all don't say nothing. So this was for the girls that look like me, that's going to speak up on what they believe in. It's unapologetically you. And that's what I did it for tonight.
You know, again, I'm with you. I didn't like what she did, but she's right about this.
She is, and I didn't notice this. Last night I was watching, I was homesick yesterday, and I was watching Early Edition, my program, and John Tomasi was on, and John said that he actually saw on a conservative website, he didn't say which one, he saw 2 articles over the course of the weekend. One was about what Caitlin Clark did, lauding it, saying how great it is, how she showed, look at her, she's puffing her chest, she deserves it, she's the greatest player. And then when Angel Reese did it, it was classless. It was the wrong thing to do. It was too boisterous. So I do think, by and large, when people criticize Angel Reese, it is not ubiquitous. It is not across the board. It is because they look at her in a different way. And I think that they expect black women to carry themselves differently than white women. And so for that matter, I have no problem with her doing it, because I think that you should continue to do with what you're comfortable doing. I don't personally like it, no matter who you are, what your gender or race is. I don't like it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to do it.
Okay, so I wanted to get to this Dan Shaughnessy comment. He's talking about celebrations, male sports as well. People, dancing around at home plate or in the end zone in a football game. He doesn't talk about that, but that's what I've seen more often, which I kind of like.
There are times when I like celebrations. Like, I think when you hit a walk-off home run and everybody goes bananas at home plate, I like it. I think when you're watching a football game and you see some of these choreographed things in the end zone. Like, I remember one that the Minnesota Vikings did a few years ago, and they pretended it was after the men won the gold medal in curling, and they all pretended they were sweeping the curling rock. Like, things like that I don't mind, because you've done something, and if you're already up, like, I don't mind you celebrating the fact that you're
dancing.
Up, you're dancing, doing things. I don't like when it's directed to taunt someone
exactly.
else.
That's a difference. I agree.
That to me is
Who
the
was
difference.
the football player who put a camera in his pants or something?
He did?
It was probably like Terrell Owens.
And when he scored a touchdown, Jamie, can you check that out? Some player
in his
socks or his pants.
How can the camera
after
see?
He scored, I don't know.
He took it out and he
took a picture of himself or something. I think your criterion is perfect.
Yeah.
If you're celebrating and having fun, but you're not like pointing at the pitcher or pointing at the defenseman. You know what I love? I don't think it's taunting. When a guy hits a massive home run in baseball and he just walks down the first base line as opposed to
watches it. Yeah, I don't mind it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great, exciting moment in a sport that
and
isn't
they
as
trot
exciting.
around and they hold their hat up and all that kind of stuff. But I do like the dancing.
So the big controversy in town right now, I don't know if you guys have seen this, is the lights at Fenway Park now. So when they hit a home run at Fenway Park, they did this when Adam Duvall hit a walk-off home run on Saturday. Red Sox came back. They were down 1 run to the Orioles. Anyway, they ended up winning the game, and Adam Duvall hits a walk-off home run. And they did this like crazy light show where it was almost like strobes and stuff. I liked it in that moment for a walk-off, but then they did it every time someone hit a home run yesterday. They were in the first inning, and I was like, well, this is stupid. Like we're going to have 1 million home runs, and every time you do it, you're going to also, I know we don't do this in the United States, but it's very common in Europe. What if someone has epilepsy or something where
that's what Shaughnessy said. I was just glad the electric light orchestration didn't trigger any seizures in the crowd of 29,000.
Well, one last thing. I don't know if I haven't read Shaughnessy yet, but you know what? Another example of too much is when the Red Sox a year or 2 years ago, when you hit a home run, you got pushed through the dugout
and the cart,
even though that was fine the first 3 times, Didn't they also do it if they're down 12 runs?
Yes.
And somebody hits out? What are they celebrating?
It's like when somebody gets a sack in a football game and you're down like 32 to 10, and you're like, and you're like, oh, good, you finally made a stop. Congratulations, you didn't stop him for the first 30 points.
One last baseball thing before we move to golf, believe it or not, with the political question there. We discussed with you, I think, last week the new rules, which I love, which are shorten the game, I think, by 23 minutes or something.
And the average opening
which
weekend,
is fabulous.
Huge.
By the way, this is the notion: a pitcher's got to pitch within X number of seconds. The batter's got to be ready to go. Rafael Devers, for those who don't follow the Sox, best player on the Red Sox, is called out at home plate.
Yeah.
Not just the strike, called out the third strike. No pitch, no swing. Here's the broadcast of it.
He misses the foul.
He's out. No way. A pitch clock violation.
Wow, a violation. He is out at home.
God.
That is strike 3.
My reaction to that was that, well, that's unfortunate. They're going to get used to the rules and they're going to stop doing it. In a week, we're not going to be talking about these things. But the joy of having a baseball game that isn't interminable, I think is fabulous. I'm totally loving it.
I've been watching a fair amount of baseball this weekend. And I mean, yesterday, the Milwaukee Brewers are my hometown team. They played in the afternoon, so I watched them in their home opener against the Mets. The Mets pitcher had 4 pitch clock violations.
Really?
The Brewers walked 4 times.
Because of that?
4 times
that's great.
on a pitch clock violation that also had a hitter. So the hitter rule was one that I didn't entirely understand. You have to be back in the batter's box with 8 seconds remaining on the pitch clock so that the pitcher has enough time to set up to throw the pitch. I think it's great. I think it's made it all. The shift has made it better. The bigger bases. They also have bigger bases.
Like a huge pizza box.
It is. It's like a big pizza box. But your steal rate is up, I think, like 20% from last year.
Which is more exciting.
It's more exciting.
I realized I couldn't read my writing. I want to make one more comment about the women's championship game beyond the controversy. I never heard of it. First of all, you know that I think only women coaches should be coaching women. We've discussed
loved her
a lot. This woman went to LSU 2 years ago, the coach.
Yep.
Yeah.
LSU had never won any of these championships. She had won 3 championships in women's basketball. Baylor. She comes, and in 2 years, they go from nothing to now, which really speaks to the quality not only of the kids,
I loved her in that she had the spangled jacket on, and then she's crying and saying how happy she was.
What's
for
her name?
everybody.
Mulkey.
Back in Louisiana, and how she was glad she could do this for them. I really liked her a lot.
Do you know one of my favorite quotes is, they sold out. They had great attendance the whole entire weekend for the Final Four, and she said, "We sold this place out even when Taylor Swift was in town." Taylor Swift played Dallas this weekend. I thought that was awesome.
So let's talk about Bubba Watson. He won the Masters, I think, last year, right?
No, Scotty Scheffler won last year.
Okay,
but he's
whenever.
won the Masters.
He's won the
Twice,
Masters.
I think.
But now he's gone to this LIV, the Saudi Arabian Golf League, and that's run by Saudi Arabia, which has horrible, horrible human rights stuff, but they're paying a lot of money. He said he went there prayerfully, which I guess means he prayed to Jesus, and Jesus said, go for the dollars.
The Lord said, take all of the money, even though they whip people in the streets.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my issue with it. Like, listen, I can't tell you what to do. A lot of these guys, like a Bubba Watson, who's 44, which I know isn't that old, but his game is starting to deteriorate. Most of the guys who went on from the PGA Tour to the LIV Golf Tour were kind of hitting a plateau. They weren't playing as well. Playing team golf makes it easier to win, easier to make money. Fine. I don't like it. It's not, I shouldn't say it's not a choice I would make. If I had made millions upon millions of dollars, I don't think I would. Right now, if LIV Golf offered me tens of millions of dollars, I might have to think about it because I'm not rich like these guys are. What I don't like is that they seem to think they are immune from being questioned about it.
Yeah.
And what Bubba Watson complained about in this article to the New York Times in a Q&A was like, he was saying, we're going to go to the Masters this week, and it's not going to be about us and playing in the Masters. We're going to get all these questions about why we went there. Well, yeah, you made a choice. So if you want to make $100 million a year to play in 10 tournaments on a team because you want to maximize the end of your career, fine. But then you have to know that you're going to be asked questions about playing for a country that is trying to whitewash what they do through sports. And that's essentially what they're doing, right? They're trying to whitewash and make it seem like they're this hip, cool country that's, got all these guys playing for them. So no, I'm sorry. You don't get to not answer or not be asked these questions. I don't think anyone. The only golfer I think that is kind of up there in the odds to win the Masters is Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka. But I was reading an article, sort of a preview article. the way that they play golf now, it is team golf, and they only play 72 holes. However it's done, they're not really in the shape.
54 holes. 72 is the PGA.
PGA,
right?
so
Yeah,
54
3
holes,
rounds,
thank you.
yeah.
3 rounds over 4 rounds. Thanks, I'm bad at math, Jim. Thank you for that.
It's okay, it's my great expertise.
They may not really have and they can also, if they don't hit a good shot and their partner does, then you don't have to finish the hole. So there's all these things that just make it, quite frankly,
Why are they
easier
allowed to
win.
play? I don't understand. If you leave the PGA,
I was going to ask
forget
that.
the human rights. By the way, Tiger Woods gets a lot of crap. Tiger Woods reportedly turned down $500 million to play in this LIV thing. Good for him. So if you make that choice beyond the human rights issue, why doesn't the Masters say you made your choice, you can't play?
I think it's, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. The PGA Tour, they don't play for the PGA Championship. They don't play in the U.S. Open. The PGA said, you made your choice, you made your bed, you lie in it. I think it's because because Augusta's a private club, and so they can make their own decision. I think through they're up against it. Like if you're a champion, if you're a Masters champion, you are like a lifelong member of Augusta National, so you are always welcome to play in their tournaments.
But it's not just him. Am I wrong about that? I thought I don't know.
It's not just Bubba Watson. No, I mean, Dustin Johnson is one, I believe, the Masters. Brooks Koepka, I believe, is one of. So there's a number of Phil Mickelson. So there's a number of golfers who have won who have sort of always been allowed back. Yeah, I think there's 17 golfers that play on the LIV Tour that will also be playing in the Masters.
I realize we only have 2 minutes left, and before it gets too late, I promised a friend that I would mention that a week from Thursday, you were speaking at the Belmont Women's Club. Is that not correct?
I need to get back to her about.
You're not going?
No, I am. I need to. I was out of town and then I got sick and I need to send them a bio and a headshot.
It is Wendy. It's a great thing, and I did it a couple of years ago. Did you ever do it? It's really fun.
No.
It's a great audience. And what are you talking about?
What? Oh.
You don't know about that either.
I think they just want me. You know what I just realized? I think I agreed to do this, and I think I agreed to do it on a night that my husband and I were supposed to go to a concert together. So Sean and I are going to have a difficult conversation.
This is a hell of a promotion. It's the Belmont Women's Club. We'll give you more details.
I'm choosing the Belmont Women's Club over my husband because I said I would do it, and I asked him if it was okay, and he said it was fine. But yeah, I think they just want. I think it's just. I don't want to talk about it. I think it's just a Q&A, and I think they want to hear from a woman who has worked in like a male-dominated industry and is sort of come up in this. I think they just want. I think it's like a fireside chat kind of.
Fireside chat.
I haven't had a chance to speak with the woman who reached out to me yet. That's why I didn't.
Okay, so before you go, what are you doing with your $350?
Well,
by the way, you bet on UConn before the whole thing started?
No, I bet on them. I think around the Sweet 16 when they had plus 850 odds. Like I was like, boy, UConn could. I'm like, UConn could surprise the people.
So you're like a total addict now. You're betting like nonstop, right?
No, actually, that was it. And then what else did I bet this weekend?
I'm not an addict.
Much.
What else did I bet this weekend?
I mean, not much. Like mostly, I'm just taking my free bets and doing futures or doing $5 or $10 bets here and there. I'm not betting as much as I was in the beginning.
We'll see about that.
It's hard. I don't like losing, and you lose a lot. Losing's boring.
Okay, fair
Trini's
enough.
trying to keep her betting in check here, and we admire you for that. Thank you very much, Trini Casey, who's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Coming up, the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, she's going to talk to us about this election tomorrow of a Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin that is going to be crucial for abortion rights out there, gerrymandering out there. It's a big deal. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Rockland Trust Bank. Their team is dedicated to bringing the vision of your business to life, providing support and advice tailored to your specific goals. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. Groundbreaking inventor Maria Telkes designed and built the world's first successfully solar-heated house in Dover, Mass. Learn more about this incredible pioneer on American Experience, The Sun Queen, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Zoe Matthews, senior producer for Boston Public Radio, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We'll start the noon hour with Massachusetts Civil Liberties Union Executive Director Cal Rose as Trump heads to a New York courtroom in 2 hours to hear criminal charges in a case surrounding business fraud and those hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Then it's Frontline's Martin Smith from the first installment of his new spectacular 3-part series, America and the Taliban.
I'm Marjorie Egan. We'll also speak with Dave Pelton on a new report incoming from the Boston Foundation on a growing black middle class in and around the city and a big decline in Boston public school kids going to college. We're going on with today's show, bringing you additional analysis of former President Donald Trump's indictment, first from the NAACP's Michael Curry, to then retried federal judge Nancy Gertner, then Harvard's Ron Sullivan, and, of course, you at 877-301-8970. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Amy Held. Security is tight in New York City ahead of former President Trump's arraignment today at Manhattan Criminal Court. Trump has been telling supporters the still sealed charges against him are politically motivated. And NPR's Ilya Maritz reports authorities are preparing for protests.
There are barricades all around the court building and police are out in force. Both pro- and anti-Trump demonstrators are in the little park across the street. And at some point, the ex-president will enter the building and begin the process of being formally charged as a criminal defendant. A historic first. The judge in the case is the same judge who oversaw the conviction of Trump's business on felony tax fraud charges in December. This indictment, when it's unsealed, will spell out the precise criminal counts against Trump. His lawyers have said the Manhattan district attorney is politically motivated and that their client will vigorously fight the charges. Ilya Maritz, NPR News, New York.
Voters in Wisconsin will decide today whether conservatives or liberals will control the state Supreme Court. Mayan Silver of member station WUWM reports the results could determine the future of key cases, including abortion and voting rights.
There's been record-breaking spending in this race from both in and out of the state. Voters are being flooded with text messages, mailers, and ads, and political activists and community organizers are in full swing. In Milwaukee's predominantly black Metcalf Park neighborhood, Danelle Cross told people at a sip and paint event to help others get to the polls.
Grandmothers, call your grandkids. Get them out to vote if you have to pick them up.
Liberal-backed candidate Judge Janet Protasiewicz has said she supports reproductive rights and fair maps. Conservative-backed former Supreme Court Justice Daniel Kelly has said redistricting is a political question and abortion is deadly for children. For NPR News, I'm Mayan Silver in Milwaukee.
The FDA has decided to authorize a second round of bivalent COVID-19 booster shots, but only for those age 65 or older who got their first one at least 4 months ago, or those with weakened immune systems who got theirs at least 2 months ago. The goal is to better protect high-risk people with vaccines that target the Omicron variant. An official announcement is expected within weeks. Finland is now officially a NATO member, completing a historic security shift triggered by Russia's war in Ukraine. And Russia is not pleased. NPR's Rob Schmitz reports.
NATO welcomes Finland as its 31st member in a flag-raising ceremony at the bloc's headquarters in Brussels. Finland has attempted to maintain relations with Russia even after fending off an invasion attempt by the Soviet Union in World War II. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine marked the end of an era and prompted the Nordic country to seek security under NATO's collective defense, which states that an attack on one member is an attack on all.
It's NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. Services for the late activist and former state rep Mel King will be held next week. King died a week ago today at age 94. A public viewing and visitation is set for Monday, April 10th from 4 to 8 p.m., and the funeral will be held the next day at noon. Both events are taking place at the Union United Methodist Church on Columbus Ave. There are also plans to carry the funeral on Zoom, and the family has invited those who are paying tribute to Mel King to wear bow ties to the event as a big tribute to him. And with just a few days into a new state law aimed at making roads safer for walkers and bicyclists, drivers must allow them, as well as skateboarders, a passing distance of at least 4 feet. Massachusetts Biker Coalition Director Galen Mook says he hopes the law will reframe how we share the road.
I think this is a good kind of change of culture of how motorists must conceive of who is actually the most vulnerable out there. And it provides a designation for folks who really do need more protections.
Former Governor Baker signed the law before he left office in January. In sports, it's the Red Sox and Pirates playing Game 2 of their 3-game series at Fenway this evening. The Celtics are in Philadelphia. They play the 76ers tonight. Cloudy today, high near 60 degrees, staying cloudy overnight tonight and tomorrow. Rain near 70 degrees on Thursday. It is right now 53 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments' team of specialists offer guidance on investing, retirement income, and Social Security. FisherInvestments.com. Investments in securities involve the risk of loss.
I'm Henry Santoro, GBH News 89.7.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Jim Browdy's back, by the way. He's been lurking around Mar-a-Lago for a few days down there trying to catch a glimpse of the former president. Didn't get one, I guess. But in any case, we are live at the Boston Public Library. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are streaming on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Hi, Jim.
I was not covering the president. I was covering the demonstrators, such as they were. It's actually not covering them either. I just happened to be there.
And he rear-ended someone in his friend's car.
I did, an hour after I got there. We're joined now by... We're joined now by Carol Rose, Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Hello there, Carol. How are you?
Hi, good to be here. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
So, Carol, we are obsessed with the subject, particularly Jim, of cameras in the courtroom or no cameras in the courtroom. And what do you make of today? There's going to be no cameras. There's going to be no audio. Reporters cannot bring in their laptops. They can't record on their phones. They're going to be taking notes in a notepad. And we only have 5 photographers who are going to be escorted out, apparently, before the arraignment even begins. What do you make of this?
Well, I think there's always a balance between due process and transparency. But, when they say justice is blind, I don't think they mean that they don't want cameras in the courtroom. I think, democracy is restored when people can see what's happening. There's going to be all sorts of rumors flying about this case anyway. But I think the more transparency that we have, the more faith we're going to have that the process will be fair, and the more likely that we are to have due process.
Well, when you say you got a balanced due process, other than I don't think any state allows the jury ever to be their image.
No jury.
So what is the due process? If it's an open courtroom, if I chose to walk into the courtroom, I could sit there. Not Trump's today,
yeah,
obviously.
No, I don't think
I could walk there. So if
yeah.
I could watch from there, you're going to argue to us in a few minutes with which we agree that it's great the legislature's continuing hybrid access.
Right.
So if you choose or can't get to the State House, you can watch a hearing or a proceeding. Same thing here. If you can't go, don't want to go to a federal courthouse to watch the Tsarnaev trial, or to go to 100 Center Street in Manhattan to go watch Donald Trump. As long as the judge protects his due process in the proceeding, it seems to me it's no different with a camera than it is live in person.
No, I completely agree with you, and that is the ACLU's position. I'm just saying, in general, there's always going to be a challenge of due process, but I don't think the cameras in the courtroom in any way actually undermine due process. To the contrary, I think they make sure that the public faith in the system is going to be working, because we'll get to see it at work.
I don't mean to repeat this repeatedly. That's double whatever. But we're going to ask Judge Gertner later. But let me ask you, it would seem to me if you're a judge in this case and you have a defendant whose primary quality is being a serial liar.
Right.
In the highest profile criminal case, maybe in American history, at least recent American history, wouldn't the default be, of course, we'll create an audio or a visual record of this, as opposed to a written transcript, right? So,
and I would think too that it would protect the judge themselves, because they would be able to show the public that they treated the person fairly. So,
not only that, the accuracy would be enhanced by reporters being able to have recordings of the proceedings and to use their laptop, where most of us can type faster than we can write.
Right.
You know, okay, moving ahead, we're going to get back to this again with Michael Curry, who's a lawyer, to Judge Gertner, Ron Sullivan from Harvard Law School, and we're going to do our best between 2 and 3. I was going to say to bring you the arraignment. We can't bring you the arraignment, bring you information on the arraignment the second it happens. Maura Healey has never, to her credit, has never missed an opportunity to say one of her highest priorities as a candidate and now as governor is to protect reproductive freedom for women. She has said on this show that she will do whatever, no matter what happens in courts across this country. If this guy, I'm sure we talked to you about this, if this judge in Texas decides that he is going to say the FDA violated its whatever, and on the one abortion pill of the 2, and he's not just going to ban it, but he's going to ban it nationwide. What is her recourse? What is your recourse at the Civil Liberties Union if this guy issues a national injunction against its sale?
So, I mean, there's a few things. First of all, we don't know how long because it's going to be challenged. Whatever the judge rules, it's going to be challenged by either side. So there'll be an attempt to have a stay, which is sort of to freeze things in place.
Which is not guaranteed. It's a request to the court.
It's a request to the court, and the court could deny it. So that'll be.
By the way, I should say, I don't want to scare people. We have no idea what his decision is going to be. We just know he's very anti-choice, and we have no idea if his decision is going to be nationwide, but that's the worst case scenario.
Right, so that's the worst case scenario. So assuming a worst case scenario, number one, people should remember abortion is still available and legal here in Massachusetts. So that's one thing people here need to know. The second is that even though mifepristone, which is the drug that's approved by the FDA back in 2000 after a 4-year process, still safer than Viagra, safer than Tylenol. But if, in fact, it were to be banned, there are other methods, include misoprostol, which is another drug that's often taken in conjunction. But also, it's here in Massachusetts, we're hoping that the governor will instruct all of the providers that they can continue to use up the stock of mifepristone that they have, right? So that at least for some, there'll be some time being while we can still use mifepristone, even if this judge puts a ban on FDA approval, right? Because the stocks are already out. We already have supplies. And that will buy a little bit of time while the court works out whether there'll be a stay.
You know, every time we talk about the courts with people like Ayanna Pressley, who's the most optimistic person I think we ever have on the show.
I know.
With a sense where at the end you're going, yeah, I'm optimistic. No, I'm not. So it goes, assuming the worst case scenario, which based on this guy's history is the likely scenario, it goes to one of the most conservative appellate courts in the country. His decision is affirmed. And then it goes to an anti-reproductive freedom Supreme Court. So it's not unreasonable to think that they will sustain a lower court ruling on banning this thing.
No, and I think this is part of the larger, what's happening in this country. There's an effort to try to ban access to abortion and miscarriage care, abortion care, all sorts of care nationwide. I mean, there's efforts in Congress, there's efforts in the courts, and that's why groups like the ACLU and other reproductive justice groups are fighting back, and why the battle is often going to be in the states. And so, the best we can do is to continue to fight the battle here in Massachusetts. We have the best shield law in the country because of groups like the ACLU and because our state legislature was so good on this and our governor is so good on this. So we need to continue to be a beacon of liberty across the country. And remember, when it went to the people, to the ballot in Kansas, the people of Kansas, everybody says, what's the trouble with Kansas, right? It's a red state. But they went alone into the ballot booth and they voted that they want to have access to abortion health care and reproductive health care in general. And I think that's overwhelmingly the sentiment of most people.
Well, we're going to get to Wisconsin, which is going to have an election that's going to affect reproductive rights out in Wisconsin in a second. But before
is it today?
It's tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow.
Oh, okay. I thought it was today.
I could be wrong. I think
I could be wrong too.
It's today.
Oh, it's
today. Okay. So we'll know today the results then.
Right.
But I was going to ask you to explain to people, why is it that a federal judge down in Texas can have this sweeping ruling affecting abortion rights, and also, as we know, there's been a sweeping judgment out of Texas about Obamacare. Things that used to be covered under Obamacare may not soon be covered under Obamacare, preventative health kind of things. Why is it that someone in Texas can make a ruling that affects everybody in the other 49 states?
Because it's a federal judge. The federal judges have the ability to try to do that. And we've seen that sometimes happen in reverse in good ways. We had a federal judge here in Massachusetts when the Muslim travel ban came in that did a federal injunction and put a stay on that. So sometimes that happens, but usually then there's a pause and then it gets worked out in the courts.
But why is it, though? Because a federal judge anywhere can make a decision that affects everybody on any matter?
Yeah.
That's how it works.
That's just how it works. But that's why the action is really now, I will just say, moving to the states. And I think it's going to be really important as we think about Wisconsin, but also here in Massachusetts, that we think about the power of the state court judges and state Supreme Court judges, even though they also go to the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately. But there's, in general, state constitutional law, you can be more protective of civil rights and civil liberties than the federal Constitution requires.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we mentioned it in passing. You were supporters, as was the organization we represented here last week, I think, the New England First Amendment Coalition, of continuing COVID-inspired hybrid access to stuff at the State House, meaning not only can you go, now that the State House is open, you can also, if you choose not to go or can't go for whatever reasons, you can watch. This is probably an embarrassing question. What is the argument? It's extended until March of 2025. What is an argument any legislator makes against giving someone remote access? Of course, I guess that's the same. What is their argument against disclosing a vote in a committee? They don't have an argument for that either.
Right.
Is there any argument? I mean, they did the right thing, so I don't want to damn them.
And I don't want to say hats off to Governor Healy for doing the right thing, for extending this. And now we hope the legislature will make it permanent because it's so important. We saw of all the bad things that happened during the COVID pandemic, some of the good stuff was that more people participated in town government because they could participate remotely. And so you didn't have to get childcare or find parking, or if you couldn't get away from work, all these reasons. And so that's why not only civil rights groups like the ACLU and reporters groups, First Amendment groups approve this, but also disability rights groups are very supportive of this. The argument against it is I think it arguably makes local town meetings they have to be more open to the people that they say that they're representing.
Well, they can't say that publicly. So what do they say publicly?
They can't say it publicly.
What do
they say it's too much of a burden.
Oh, okay.
Right? Or we have to show up, so everybody else should have to show up.
Didn't Healy, somebody told us, oh no, it wasn't Healy, it was the guy from the First Amendment Coalition saying the bill provides funding for smaller communities that can't afford it. So that's addressed.
And it's actually pretty inexpensive to provide hybrid meetings.
Well, good.
So let's get back to this Wisconsin situation. Tell us about this vote. Sorry, it's not tomorrow, it's today, as you guys corrected me, about Supreme Court justices in the state of Wisconsin, a very, very gerrymandered place.
So very much so. And one of the things that we see is in places like Wisconsin where they have elected judges as opposed to here in Massachusetts where they're appointed and confirmed.
Yeah, Jim
we
wants
have
to
our
change
own
that.
issues. But elections are really problematic. If you don't want your judiciary to be politicized, then you don't really want
How many states have elections for judges?
Oh, I don't know offhand.
I think it's every state except ours. Am I not right about that?
I
think.
No, it's
I
not
thought
that
it
many.
was. New York has elections.
Yeah, but
that's only 2 states too.
Well, okay.
We're up to 2.
But I think it's problematic. But here what we have is a situation. We have a divided court with 4-3, with one of the conservative justices is stepping down, and so there's a real battle today over who's going to get the seat between a more progressive liberal Janet Protasevsky and Daniel Kelly, who's the conservative, and they're trying to go to the voters and to see what the voters want. And so there's a lot of effort to try to let people understand the power that justices have in Wisconsin. So they're going to decide things like
gerrymandering. What a difference a justice makes.
What a difference a justice.
Yeah.
And the ACLU has a campaign on that. On reproductive justice, on gerrymandering, on right to vote, on affirmative, so many things. The action is moving to the state courts. And that's why this particular election is unusually important from a civil rights and civil liberties perspective. 13
states elect judges in partisan fashion, meaning parties nominate them. 8 states elect some judges, so it's less than half. Even though this is an argument against my position, which is judges should be elected, do you know how much money they're spending? $40 million.
She's getting more money. The liberal justice, which I'm happy.
But it's troubling anyway, isn't it?
The money in politics is troubling all the time. But she's supposedly, if you can believe the polls, a little bit ahead.
I don't know. We'll see. I have to say, after that Kansas vote, my 95-year-old mother said, those women are going alone into the voting booth. So thank goodness for the secret ballot. And I think that's probably going to be true in Wisconsin as well.
Well, you do. That's what I'm hoping, is that there are many people who are very queasy about abortion, but they do not want it to be taken away entirely.
Well, and part of it is a lot of this stuff affects also miscarriage care and other kinds of health care. And, regardless of how any of us feel personally about it, the question is, do you want the government to decide?
Exactly.
As opposed to you and your family making this really personal and incredibly important decision. So, I think people of good conscience and reasonableness can disagree for themselves, But I don't think it should be the government making the decision for
Foisting your sense of right
Do you
and wrong on
remember,
someone
was
else,
it as recently as 15 years ago, how Wisconsin, 20 years ago, was one of the most progressive states in America? And has become such a red state with people like as a Democratic governor, but Ron Johnson, who arguably is one of the most irresponsible insurrectionist United States senators.
What happened in Wisconsin?
I think a lot of it is
Scott Walker. I don't know.
A disinvestment in public education, I think, has a lot to do with what's going on in a lot of these states across the country.
Yeah.
Hey, you mean people aren't intelligent enough to figure out how to vote? Is that what you mean? What do you mean?
They're just disinvesting in things like civic education and public education in general, and people are not putting their kids in the schools, so you don't learn about the importance of civics. I mean, one of the things, and this isn't on our list, but the ACLU, we just launched an ACLU Academy, and we're teaching people how to get involved, how to give testimony, write a letter to the editor, all these things. And my team proposed it, and I thought, well, are people going to want that? We've had hundreds of people turning out for that. And so, I've said this before, democracy really is a muscle. The more we get involved, the more we participate in our town meetings and in our school board meetings and things like that, the stronger we become. And I really hope that we in Massachusetts can invest in civic education going forward, because I do think it's the heart of our democracy.
Well, speaking of your initiatives, you're doing something involving artificial intelligence?
I am.
Yeah, what are you doing?
So we're involved with artificial intelligence. Yeah, so, well, as you know, there's a new large language model, ChatGPT, that is coming out, that's being, put out there. And one of the things that
only 100 million people signed up in 2 weeks is coming out there. I'd say it is out there.
Okay, it's unleashed into the wild, Jim. You're
Thank
absolutely right. So I think one of the things that the people need to remember is that these machines don't have agency, right? They're not human beings. They're actually language predictors is what they really are. And so one of the most important things that we can do when we're talking about any kind of artificial intelligence or algorithmic applications is to make sure that we hold true to principles, which is transparency and openness, that you should have some privacy rights to your data. And that's one of the reasons we have this really important data privacy protection bill that's proposed into the Massachusetts legislature. We need to make sure that we're protected from data brokers, people who would scrape our data. They can take our likeness, our search histories, our medical information, our financial information, all these things. It's completely a Wild West.
But you're not for banning
unregulated.
TikTok, and the people who want to ban it say they're doing exactly that.
Well, it's not about just TikTok. It's all the companies. I mean, you can, why ban TikTok? Why not ban Meta, Facebook, Microsoft, all of these? So what we need to do is to get into, instead of banning, we need to have strong regulations that protect consumer privacy. They've done it in Europe much better than we've done it here, and we have the opportunity to do it here, starting here in Massachusetts with the passage of this data privacy, consumer privacy protection.
Is that the AI Commission thing, or is that a separate thing on your
That's a separate thing.
What is the AI Commission?
So the AI Commission would be to actually set up a commission.
This is a bill you're supporting.
Yeah, and both of them are important.
Okay.
And so there's a whole lot of ways that we can actually put in first principles about, what rights do we have to say that we don't want our data to be used, or to be used for a certain reason but not then sold to other people. It's the data brokers that are really at the heart of a lot of the problems, irrespective of whether it's generative AI or other forms of algorithms.
Where's the ACLU on protections for children? You hear this a lot, people concerned about their 9-year-old kids or 12-year-old kids getting all this stuff online they shouldn't. And a lot of parents are not as swift with the technology as the children are, and the children run end runs around the parents. Where are you about restrictions for kids?
I mean, it's always, you want to be able to have restrictions that aren't violative of free speech, but are protective of consumer privacy. And so if we pass some of these data consumer privacy protections that we've proposed, it would apply to kids as well as to adults.
Yeah.
So there doesn't have to be an age discrimination. But it's really about in the data collection and then selling it and then, barraging these kids, or all of us, with information based on our own behaviors, right? And so the machine gets to know us better than we know ourselves, and that's really where the danger arises.
So what's happening in this free speech challenge to immigration law? Adam Liptak wrote about in the New York Times.
Yeah, no, it was just argued by my colleague, Aisha Bandari, the National ACLU in the U.S. Supreme Court, her first Supreme Court case. Yeah,
good for her.
It was a very exciting, and she did a great job. So this really has to do with efforts to criminalize the use of speech. So this is a case out of the Ninth Circuit, out of California, that's in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, that basically is trying to hold this man accountable, or criminally accountable, for the fact that he would say to somebody, I think you should stay here in this country, which is actually encouraging them to commit a civil violation, not a criminal violation. And if we were to be in the place where we actually criminalized just saying things to people like, I'm encouraging you to get an abortion, for example, or I'm encouraging you to stay here even though you're undocumented. Any kind of encouragement, that's very dangerous because that's different than now if it's incitement to violence and imminent threat, those kinds of things. Those aren't protected by the First Amendment. But just saying things, a priest saying to a parishioner, gee, I hope you find your way forward and despite the fact that you're undocumented, those kinds of things, or I hope you find your way forward in seeking medical care and abortion care. We don't want to criminalize merely talking to people. That would be such a violation of the First Amendment and such an undermining, a criminalization of people who have speech that we may not agree with. And that's dangerous.
Do we have is this sound from that? Yeah, we do. Here is just sound. At least there is sound in the Supreme Court, even though there are no cameras.
Yep.
This is during the March 27th oral arguments. It's called U.S. v. Hansen is the case. And this is Associate Justice Sotomayor talking to one of the lawyers. Here.
We're going to talk to the grandmother who lives with her family who's illegal or who are non-citizens. The grandmother tells her son she's worried about the burden she's putting on the family. And the son says, Abuelita, you are never a burden to us. If you want to live here, continue living here with us, your grandchildren love having you. Can you prosecute this? And if not, why not? So what do you tell the grandmother?
I think not, Justice Sotomayor. I think it's very hard to make out.
Stop qualifying with think. Because the minute you start qualifying with think, then you're rendering asunder the First Amendment. People have to know what they can talk about.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, that is a scary thought.
It's an incredibly scary thought, and we don't want to criminalize thoughts. We don't want to criminalize the abuelita or anybody else. The doctor who says to the patient, gee, if you could stay longer, we could help you get that cancer treatment, right? That shouldn't be a crime. We cannot go down the path of thinking that we can somehow sanitize our way by banning speech. There are so many tools that we have to ensure freedom and speech at the same time. We need to avoid these false traps.
So what's the argument of the 5 or 6 justices who are going to deny us our First Amendment rights in their decision? What are they going to? What is the argument on? I used to have really decent ability to figure out the argument on the other side. I've totally lost it. What possible argument against, if you're encouraging I think you should murder your next door neighbor. I really think it'd be a good idea. And while you're at it, get her husband while you're in the thing. That might be a problem.
Well,
but I mean, what is the argument against the First Amendment right of that person to make a statement, particularly when the thing that they're urging is not even a crime to begin with, as you say, a civil violation?
Exactly. And so, remember Justice Brandeis said, bad facts make bad law, good facts make good law. So when you talk about, go murder your wife, that's bad facts. When you say, keep your grandmother here, that's good facts. So what we want to do is to make sure that when the court passes laws, that they can't restrict the principle that they pass to the facts that they choose, but that's what they'll try to do. They're going to try to say, well, on certain facts, on these facts, we're going to say
which
it's a
aren't
crime.
even before the court.
Yeah,
right.
Which aren't even before the court. So one of the most important things for all of us to think about, particularly in free speech cases where it's often uncomfortable because the facts may be bad, is apply the facts to somebody that you actually agree with and see if you would like them to be subject to that regulation. And if the answer is no, then we have to live with the results of that.
Okay, Carol Rose, thank you very much as always.
See you all. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Thank you very much, Carol Rose. Up next, Frontline's Martin Smith joins us to talk about his latest documentary, America and the Taliban. This is a really important piece of journalism. It's a very upsetting piece of journalism. We're going to talk to the guy who put it all together after this quick break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on YouTube.com.
There are many issues facing our Commonwealth. The housing crisis, the opioid epidemic, the high prices families are paying for childcare. What should our leaders focus on?
I want a more efficient transportation system.
Prison reform. I'm GBH News State House reporter Katie Lannon. We want to make sure that the things people are asking for, the things people need, are actually the things that are being talked about at the State House. And that's why we want to hear from you. Visit gbhnews.org/yoursay.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Sunbug Solar, a full-service local solar energy company helping to grow renewable energy in Massachusetts since 2009. To learn more about current solar energy employment opportunities, visit sunbugsolar.com.
And Swan Galleries with African American art at auction April 6th, featuring works by Norman Lewis and Beaufort Delaney, works carved and tooled on leather by Winfred Rembert, and contemporary artist Betty Saar. Info at swangalleries.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. 2 programming notes. Next Tuesday, a week from today, Maura Healey will spend an hour with us for Ask the Governor. And today, Marjorie and I are staying till 3 o'clock. We'd like to tell you we'll be bringing you live the arraignment of Donald Trump. We will not, because the court has not allowed it. We will bring you the information as soon as we get it and take your calls. But first, we're joined now on Zoom by Frontline's Martin Smith. Martin's latest series is America and the Taliban, which airs in 3 parts, the first of which you can watch tonight on GBH at 9. It is spectacular and must-see viewing. Martin is a correspondent, producer, writer, and director for the film. His co-director, producer, writer is Marcella Gaviria. I hope I pronounced that right. Martin, it's great to see you, and congratulations as always.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you guys.
Well, first of all, Martin Smith, let me tell you, I commend your courage, because you went into some very dangerous places, and I would have been an absolute nervous wreck doing what you did. But in any case, tell people what you're looking at in this 3-part series.
Well, we went in after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban and wanted to provide on a big campus that Frontline provided give people context for this whole 20 years and look hard at the first year and a half of Taliban rule. So it was to help people that digest their news in small bits of an article here or a TV hit here, and give people a larger, more in-depth, sober look. I say in-depth. That often designates something's going to be boring. I guarantee you these 3 hours are not boring. And there are many twists and turns to the story. And we just wanted to get our heads around the whole 20-year effort, look at the mistakes, the miscalculations, the hubris that brought us to where we ended up in August of 2021.
You know, by the way, we're going to talk to you about this in a minute. We've only seen the first installment, but the thing that will blow people away is you're returning to speaking to the exact same people you spoke to a decade or so ago. It is staggeringly.
At the same place.
At the same site. We'll get to that. But first, one of the things you look at is what went wrong. And I guess there are a lot of things. One of them is expressed by General David Petraeus, saying that after 9/11, we failed to see the importance and legitimacy that the Taliban had in some parts of the country. Here is General Petraeus, former general, obviously, and director of the CIA. Here he is.
And in my own post-mortem of why didn't things turn out better in Afghanistan, one of the questions that lingers, that hangs over this, is why we did not actually try to incorporate the Taliban into the new Afghanistan.
And isn't that essentially a variation on the same theme that we repeated a few years later in Iraq with Saddam Hussein's Ba'athists? So the feeling is sort of clear the decks and ignore the sympathies that some people may have for people we're not so crazy about. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a legitimacy to the Taliban. No matter what you think about them, they're Afghans. It's their country. And for us to think that we could roll in there and exclude a large part of the population Pashtuns from having a serious role was a huge mistake. I was surprised, actually, when Petraeus said what you ran. I'm glad you used that clip, because a number of people I talked to just laughed at the idea that after 9/11 we could give the Taliban any space at all. But of course, the Taliban there were no Afghans on the planes on 9/11. Yes, they gave sanctuary, as they say in the program. We gave sanctuary to Osama bin Laden, but we were not part of the planning for that attack. So there was good reason to include them at the table. By not including them, we strengthened the hardliners among them. So that was an opportunity lost. And the fact that General Petraeus even admits that was a striking moment for me.
Well, you know what was tough for me watching this was the sense that, do we really learn anything? I mean, the French were in Vietnam for years. Then things didn't work out for the French. Then we went into Vietnam. Things didn't work out for us, obviously. You know, the Russians were in Afghanistan for all those years. They're going broke. Then we go into Afghanistan. And Iraq, not understanding the culture and not understanding what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia now, how people will fight for their own land, you know, in an incredibly courageous way. It's like we somehow keep missing this kind of fundamental thing, you know what I mean?
I mean, an indigenous force like the Taliban have the ability to wait us out. And, you know, all you have to do is ask Putin what it's like to fight a group of Ukrainians that are dedicated to the liberation of their country from a Russian invasion. You don't have to like the Taliban to understand that they have legitimacy on the ground, especially in the countryside, and that ignoring that was a huge mistake. You know, and we've done it in Vietnam. We did it in. We do tend to not learn, unfortunately. And one reason to make this program was to help people think hard about how we conduct our foreign policy and extend our commitments abroad.
You know, Martin Smith from America and the Taliban, first episode of 3 airs tonight at 9 on PBS. I mentioned a minute ago you're returning to a scene. Some of the starkest video is when this counterinsurgency notion of Petraeus is implemented. And you can explain to people, if you would, in a minute, what the theory was. You have a Marine speaking to a bunch of people about as you don't say this, I as a viewer am saying this, as condescendingly as one possibly can. I'm going to ask you for the 5th time, he says, why do you go to the market that's far away when you can go to the bazaar just down their street? You have him in that incredible moment, and then you go back, is it 10 years later, whatever it is, and amazingly find some of the exact same people who were there for that moment a decade or so before. Could you describe, starting with counterinsurgency, the whole image and why it failed as miserably as it did?
Yeah, and it also had a checkered history in Vietnam, and we didn't seem to learn from that. Counterinsurgency was applied there, but the idea is summarized in the phrase clear, hold, build, and transfer. You clear the area of the enemy, you hold on to it, try to resist them coming back. Then you build institutions, whether it be a local school or a clinic or a bridge or whatever. And then you transfer control of that to the central government so that you create a strong, cohesive core government. That was all of those steps were difficult. The last one, especially given the corruption at the central government level, as we poured billions upon billions of dollars into supporting that government, it was inevitable that there would be an enormous amount of corruption. On the idea of going back there, I was blown away, I guess, by the ease with which I was able to find them. I thought it might be a failed exercise, but of course, these guys don't move around a whole lot, these villagers with arms. And so they were standing in front of the same gate that the Marine chided them or yelled at them, that they were standing there in the same place and remembered. What most surprised me is they remembered to a T what the Marine had told them 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
It was pretty mind-blowing.
How are they feeling about the Taliban's return?
There's a whole mixed there. There's a whole mix there. They're happy the war is over. They express that everywhere you go. They feel safer. The one man told me, I think it summarizes what a lot of Afghans told me, is that, look, we're still poor. There's still a drought. Yeah. Things are not great. The Marines certainly didn't help us, and the Taliban haven't either. And the Taliban were standing right there with guns. Incredible. So he felt like, he could say what he wanted to say. But that's the mix, that they're happy the war is over, but they're unhappy and uncertain about where things are going.
Yeah, we're talking with Martin Smith. Frontline is the first of 3 parts is going to be on tonight, GBH2 at 9 p.m. America and the Taliban. Speaking of the Taliban with guns, I commented on your courage at the beginning, going into places where and interviewing members of the Taliban, and I would imagine they're not that crazy necessarily about Americans, but I just was, and we know that they have done horrible things, shot women in the back of the heads, etc. Did you get assurances that you were going to be okay in these situations, or what?
I don't know if I got assurances. I mean, yes, some people in Kabul said, yeah, you can go where you want, but that doesn't mean that on the local level in the villages that you're going to be welcomed. On the other hand, they defeated a superpower, the United States, and they were happy to tell me about it and remind me about how they did it and have me go back and put it on television. And so there was a willingness of the Taliban to talk. They were high on their victory, as you can imagine. So there were a couple of instances, really one where I got roughed up a little bit on the streets of Kandahar and had to hightail it back to my car. But generally, people, they're used to seeing foreigners in their country. So it wasn't too strange to see me running around there.
Martin Smith, you said you weren't sure you'd be able to get access. One, you weren't sure you were able to find the exact same people who'd been condescended to by this Marine. But also you make clear in the first installment, you weren't even sure you get permission to go to that place to begin with. I may mix up the personalities, and if I do, please correct me. I believe it was a governor to whom you made the request. You're nodding, so at least I got that right. Was that the same man who, when you were speaking to him and mentioned the unemployment rates, the horrible health coverage, the girls after 6th grade not being able to go to school, responded to you by saying, quote, "We're not concerned with those issues"? That was him, correct?
That was exactly the same guy. And that was not, there were other Taliban that had made mention of the fact that it was up to God to provide food for people and not up to the Taliban. There was a certain arrogance that the Taliban had about doing things, excuse me, that would help people, like building roads or building clinics or doing things that needed to be done after so many decades of war. The country is in ruins, but they seemed more concerned about issuing edicts about girls' education and whatever else.
And this was after showing that ward full of starving little babies.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really difficult to watch. Martin Smith, I wondered too, you showed a lot of things blowing up. Where'd you get that footage?
Well, as we put on the screen, that's Taliban video.
It was Taliban.
Because they knew when the bombs were going off so they could roll the cameras beforehand. It's not like anybody else would know.
But how did that work? Did they give it to you to use? How did it work?
That stuff has been online for years.
Okay.
It's just that we collected it and put it all together in a big run. And I think what it was intending to show you was what we were up against, that these were huge bomb attacks. Some of them were truck bombs. And that was a huge challenge for the U.S. and NATO forces to counteract.
And you also showed some very gleeful suicide bombers either driving to their death or being strapped with bombs around their chest. What was that about?
Well, in World War I and in World War II, British and German and French soldiers marched to the front lines into slaughterhouses thinking it was going to be a cakewalk, thinking it was, the British brought over soccer balls to kick around on the battlefield. American soldiers didn't go in quite as naively as that, but in a country that controls information and pumps propaganda into the minds of young Afghans, these guys believed they were going to go to some heaven somewhere and were thrilled to contribute, thrilled to get in line and be the next guy to strap on a suicide vest.
Yeah, but I guess there you can make a case that it's a voluntary act. I'm not sure voluntary is the perfect word. You also asked pretty relentlessly about involuntary damage, the killing of innocent civilians with these bombs. You're talking to this guy who was also in Guantanamo for a while, Mullah Zaif, about civilian casualties from car bombs. Here's a little bit of that conversation.
One thing I'm not agreeing, that the target was the civilian.
Well, I have a list of all the attacks that were mounted by the Taliban and the Haqqani network, and I can share it with you.
No, I didn't think you have.
September 5th, 2019, Taliban car bomb in Kabul kills 10 Afghan civilians. In the span of a week, 24 Americans are killed, 107 Afghan civilians.
But who is the target here? Yeah,
well, if you go into a marketplace because there's a couple of soldiers and you set off a car bomb, it's going to kill women and children and innocent civilians.
This was fighting.
So he essentially, within the space of 40 seconds, seemed to be saying they weren't the target, and then, at least the way I read into it, saying, hey, this is fighting.
Yeah, well, let's keep in mind that that's the way they saw it, and it seemed like a fair calculation on their part to let some civilians die in those attacks. But at the same time, the United States was engaged in drone attacks and air assaults and night raids that, in a certain in a disturbing number of cases, resulted in the killing of innocent Afghan civilians and children, especially.
Martin Smith, we've mentioned this Marine that was yelling at the villagers a bunch of times, and he was shouting and being condescending, as Jim said. But somebody did point out somewhere, I forget who did, that when you think of Marines are not trained to be social workers. They're not really, that's not what they're good at. They're trained to be effective fighters. And that seemed to be kind of an error in the counterinsurgency thinking that hearts and minds are necessarily going to be won by men and women they're not social workers.
They are not social workers, and Petraeus himself admits that there was a tremendous amount of an ask of these guys to do that kind of work out in the field, and I think they get some training in it. They certainly are told what the design of counterinsurgency is, but it's, as I put it to Petraeus, it's a rather head-spinning design for anybody in 115-degree weather. Out in the field, encountering Afghans who make a good case that, what are they supposed to do? As one man says to the Marine, he says, what are we supposed to do? You have guns and tanks and planes, and we don't even have a rifle or a sword. What are you expecting us to do?
Yeah.
Martin Smith, I mentioned in passing something that I think most of our listeners do know a little bit about, even before seeing installment one of your video, is the oppression of girls, women, when it comes to schooling. And we have a colleague here who made a film about a wonderful local woman who is of Afghan descent, who started a school for girls years and years ago. And the image that I will never forget is when she is about to open the school for the first time. The male elders from the community are there, and they literally contort their bodies in such a way that they cannot even make eye contact with her because they're so dismissive. She goes back a year or so later to talk about not only the success of the school, but expansion, and every one of the men, fathers, in this cases, are leaning forward in their chair, making eye contact, asking questions about their daughter's education. And what I'm left with when I hear what's happened since the Taliban retook control is there's got to be upset throughout the land by not just young girls who you talk to, but their parents who understand there's one life for the boy, there's virtually no life for the girl. Am I mischaracterizing what the state of affairs is?
And in the third hour of the program, we deal with in more depth about the situation of girls and women in Afghanistan. And one girl says, that it just breaks her heart, or she makes her very upset when she watches her brother get up every morning and march off to school. And it is there were incremental gains made during the NATO-U.S. project in Afghanistan. There was real progress. The problem is that it was not sustainable. And, unless we stayed there forever and created a colony, we weren't going to inculcate the Taliban with Western values. That just wasn't going to happen. And they had the guns, they had the support of Pakistan. That's what we were up against. But yes, a lot of women in the cities, especially, made gains. It's just a shame that we set up expectations and then dashed them.
By the way, that film is called What Tomorrow Brings. Beth Murphy is the filmmaker.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's spectacular.
One last question for me, Martin Smith. I asked you in the beginning, I said that it seemed like we didn't learn for our mistakes in Vietnam or our mistakes in Afghanistan and Iraq. Do you have the sense from the military people you talk to that we have sort of learned now or not?
Well, let's take General Petraeus, who's a major player in this, and he said that we should have left a force there to support the Afghan army and police. How long? I don't know how long. For a very long time, perhaps. Others, such as National Security Advisor, retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute, felt that it was a failed project going in. Yeah. Just as President Biden, when he was vice president, thought this was. He said anybody who listened to these conversations about counterinsurgencies got to be crazy if he thinks this is going to work. But yet we went forward with it, and I think there were domestic pressures on President Obama that felt that he had to go that route.
How many times have you been to Afghanistan, Martin Smith?
I don't know.
That's what I figured the answer would be. It's amazing. The reporting is amazing. You and your colleagues did such important work, and we're really looking forward to tonight and the 2 episodes to come. Congratulations and thanks as always.
Yeah, thank
you guys.
Thank you very much for being with us. We've been speaking with Martin Smith, correspondent, producer, writer, and director for America and the Taliban, which airs in 3 parts. The first part airs tonight at 9 o'clock on PBS. It's a frontline series, of course, America and the Taliban. Thank you again to Martin Smith for being with us. Coming up, we're going to talk with Lee Pelton of the Boston Foundation. Some disturbing news about the number of kids from Boston schools that are going on to college. It's not where it should be, but some possible remedies for this problem. And more with Lee Pelton. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to appear in a New York court to face criminal charges.
It's the first time in our country's history, right, that a president here at the United States has been indicted.
I'm Adrian Florido. We'll have the latest news and analysis of Donald Trump's day in court on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, united around a vision for public access to revolutionary education. UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu. And Boston Ballet, presenting Our Journey, featuring La Mer, a world premiere about ocean preservation by choreographer Nanine Lenning, and Justin Peck's Everywhere We Go, on stage starting April 6th. bostonballet.org.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. And exactly, if they stick to the script, what is that? 80 minutes from now, the former president of the United States will be arraigned in a Manhattan courtroom. We will stay on the air live till 3 o'clock. We were going to say to bring you that arraignment. We can't bring you the arraignment because the judge has determined there'll be no cameras or audio transmission during the hearing, only still cameras and notebooks. We will bring you information on the arraignment as soon as we get it and take your calls. We'll also speak to Ron Sullivan from Harvard Law School, big-time defender in the D.C. area many years ago before he went to Harvard, about this historic arraignment this afternoon. But first, joining us at the library is Lee Pelton. Lee's the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, and as always, we disclose that he serves on the GBH Board of Trustees. Lee, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee Pelton, for coming in. So I guess the good news is you wrote about in a piece for the Globe, you and Pam Endinger. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Endinger.
Correct. Yeah.
Another board member at GBH.
Another board member.
Head of Bunker Hill Community
Board
College.
members, they're everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's world dominant.
That's right. That's right. You talked about Maura Healey's budget, 4-year tuition and fee freezes at all state universities, and funding for the creation of this Mass Reconnect, this program you can tell us about, which is all good stuff. But at the same time, it sounds like kids from Boston high schools are really struggling in terms of getting through college. So where are we with higher education and the new governor and what you guys are doing about it?
Well, let's start with the good news. And the good news is that in 2009, only about 35% of BPS students actually enrolled and completed their degree. And through a program called Boston Success, or Success Boston, actually, which is housed in the Boston Foundation and in partnership with some other nonprofits, created a program, a coaching program for BPS students, both before they left college or left high school, and for 2 years when they enrolled in college, and was able to move that 35% up significantly, and also to move the not only completion rate but the number of students who actually enrolled. So at one point at its height, and I think maybe 5 years ago, 70% of BPS students were enrolling in a college or university, which was up significantly from, I don't know, the 55% it was in 2009. What has happened, to no surprise, is there's been a drop off in both completion and in enrollment, pretty significantly. And of course, this all relates to the pandemic and the devastating impact that it had on all of us, and particularly on students in terms of having all the resources that they used to have in terms of counseling and so on and so forth to both enroll and then to complete their college degrees. Now you say, what's the big deal? The big deal is, while college and university is not for everyone, on average, a person who completes their college with a college degree will make $1 million more in their work life than someone from high school. Now, not everybody would say that's important to me to have the $1 million more, but over a 30-year period of life, that's about $35,000 a year, or 35 years of working, that's $30,000 a year. So it is not significant. And so the good news is we have this program. We saw a decline, as you would expect, during the pandemic, but the program still exists, and we will renew our efforts to both increase the completion of college and the number of students who actually enroll.
Well, can I add one thing to your list, which is, I think, implied, is you told us a couple of months ago that you were working with some other organizations, including the Federal Reserve, to update that infamous, notorious $250,000 wealth for white families in Boston as compared to 8 for black families. And the thing you're going to add that hadn't been done before is get into the whys, the causes. This is obviously, this thing you just mentioned, talk about wealth disparity, cuts to the core, not to mention quality of life. I'm embarrassed to say, until I read your piece, I hadn't even heard of the Success Boston thing. Yes. We talk to Paul Revel all the time, former Secretary of Education, now he's at Harvard. And his view is, just like when you go to the doctor doesn't say, can I have 40 people in the waiting room and I'll deal with all 40 of you. He or she deals with individuals. That's how schools should. This Success Boston coaching thing seems to be a variation on the same theme that essentially attacks that's maybe the wrong verb, but you know what I mean? The individual needs of the individual kid, right?
Right. It does. As I like to say, this is a kind of program that makes the invisible visible to young people so they can see themselves in their own future. Yeah. And I'll give you 2 examples from my own life. One is, I'll just talk about my own personal life.
Please.
So I grew up in a foreign country called Kansas. And all I wanted to do was play football. And so I was on this, we were ranked number 5 or 6 in the nation. We were
really?
Oh yeah, we were serious. And there was a guy,
What position did you play?
I played tight end.
Tight end, okay.
I find that a little hard to believe, but go ahead.
And I saw, well, I studied poetry too, but I...
He was a sensitive tight end.
So there was this football player, this tackle, number 76, his name was Lynn Stevens, and I remember him talking about going to some college named Dartmouth. And I thought, what a funny name for a college. And the irony, of course, is that some years later I become dean of Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. So that was, the world was opaque to me, and it's opaque to many of these students. And I was mentoring a student, not in this Success Boston program, but another program. This is 4 or 5 years ago, and I had been mentoring him for about a year and a half. And his junior year, he came in, and we were getting ready for college. And he said to me, I want to go to Emerson and play football. And I said, well, we have the best record of football of any other college and university because we don't have football.
We're undefeated.
We're undefeated.
It's amazing.
So, and then we talked about SATs. He didn't know what the SATs were, but that's what I'm talking about. These are young people who need our support.
Terrific.
We talked a million times. By the way, there's a Steps for Success program in Brookline. I know it's a smaller number of kids, but they do a similar thing, which I think they might go all the way through college. I'm not sure, but we talked years ago about that Globe piece about the valedictorians that came out of Boston high schools. I remember there was this one kid that went to Boston College, and he was the first in his family to go to college, and he got a lot of money from Boston College, but he didn't realize that if he didn't go full time, he was going to lose the money, and it was a really heart-rending story because he had some family issues, and so he stepped back. He wound up fine. He went into the Army and stuff like that. But the thing is, people didn't know the ins and outs because they didn't have a mentor to say, you've got to stay full-time to get your scholarship, or if you're having problems at home, we'll try to get you through this. Like a knowing adult. I think programs like this make such tremendous sense because how do you know this? How do you know what to do if something happens? Mom loses her job, or you have to go home to make money because they can't pay the rent or whatever it is.
It's especially true for a first-generation student like myself. My parents didn't go to college. My father didn't finish high school, by the way. And so it's important to have these kinds of access to mentors and counselors.
So what did your father think about his poet son?
Well, he was a little dismayed that I didn't want to be an engineer or a lawyer.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it is unusual in general. I mean, most of us are not poetry majors.
Yeah, I'm not a poet. I can't write a...
But you studied that, right?
Yeah, in literary history.
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah.
So what was it, something in high school that got you Shakespeare play?
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, it was reading Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.
There you go.
You know,
Juan that
That was
with
it.
a Shores Suta. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we're talking
Very
to
good, Jim.
former tight end Lee Pelton. So later this week, I know people like you don't like to disclose anything that's about to happen, but give us just like the top line thing. You're releasing something called Great Migration and Global Immigration, a profiled Black Boston. I think Friday is Wednesday is the release date, tomorrow. Can you give us just a preview of what you're going to be saying, Lee Pelton?
Well, a couple of things that's notable. That the black population in Greater Boston is growing. But the lion's share of that growth, I shouldn't say but, and the lion's share of that growth comes from black citizens who have an immigrant history or an ancestral history that's outside of Africa, outside of America. Mm-hmm. So most notably, Haitians and so on, and several, and so we have a growing population of Afro Latinos in Boston. So that's the major thing. The other issue, or not the other issue, but the other fact is that in 1980. The majority of blacks in Greater Boston lived in Boston proper. Today, 70% of black residents in Greater Boston live outside of Boston proper.
The Brocktons of the world?
It's mostly south. Brockton, Stoughton, Avon, and so on.
Is that about unaffordability of the city, or is there more to the...
Well, I think some of it's affordability, probably. I know for sure. One would think that, especially with respect to housing and how home ownership is so onerous these days, and rental housing. But it also may be related to something cultural. That, for instance, so if you... I don't know when's the last time you've been to Lewiston, Maine, or if you've ever been to Lewiston, Maine.
I have not. Oh, that's where.
You know, I went to
college.
Lewiston, Maine. No, I didn't
Bates,
go.
Isn't Bates there?
It may be, but I went for another reason.
1970.
Exactly. What happened there in 1970?
Well, a young boxer by the name of Cassius Clay.
Oh gosh, that's right. Yeah.
Sonny Liston.
Sonny Liston, yeah, exactly.
The Phantom Punch.
Yeah, the
Phantom
in Lewiston, Maine.
Lewiston, Maine. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's a poor town, I think.
There's also a college there too.
Yeah. Is it Bates? Am I right? Or is it a different one? Bates.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a large Somali population in Lewiston.
Read that.
There's a large Somali population in Minneapolis, as we well know. And in Portland, Oregon, there's a large Ghanaian population. And so some of this may be cultural as well as financial and economic.
By the way, I made a mistake. The release date in the public event is Thursday, not Wednesday. I forgot I didn't work yesterday, and I'm back off one day. We're talking to Lee Pelton, who runs the Boston Foundation.
So it is amazing when you read these stories about the MBTA that they need to hire hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, I usually think that was a pretty good job. You could go to the MBTA, you were 18, you could retire at 38, and you could get a pension. But then they changed the rules, I think, somewhat. So it changed after people hired after 2009. But why can't the T hire anybody?
Well, I don't want to be unkind here.
Having said that,
you can go right ahead.
That, I mean, it's a troubled part of the city, and it has been for a long time, and for reasons that I don't quite understand, despite the best interests of the governor and others. I think we would agree that some of us would agree that the management of that organization has been suboptimal. And let's hope that the new person coming in fact, will kind of restore it to and provide the kind of ridership and all of the things that we're talking about to its levels. So one thing that we've noticed is that Mayor Wu's, her providing free
bus lines.
Yes.
Buses, and I think in Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan.
Yep.
Worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Good ridership.
You can see it in the numbers, and who's riding the buses, and so on and so forth. So it did work, and I think that's a testimony to her leadership.
And by the way, a word you probably use most regularly with us in the time we've been doing this is equity, and there's a huge equity issue too. When post-pandemic, the vast majority of people who are using the T, which is way down except for the free buses, are people of color and poor people, which is, I know, a primary focus of the Boston Foundation. We just hope Mr. Eng is as good as Maura Healey says he will be.
They need a lot of money too.
They do.
$12 billion is what they said.
And the legislature is the place that's got to give them the money. And every time there's a big fight about this, you hear the same thing about people in Sturbridge don't want to spend money to fix the T that's in Boston, even though the counter argument is we're the economic engine and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, with all due
respect, you say it all the time, it's crap. I don't mean what you're saying. The Speaker and the Senate President run that building.
Well, I know
if they say we're funding it, they'll fund it. They'll vote for it.
But they haven't said it for quite some time. So why do we think they're going to say it now?
That's an excellent question.
Well,
we shall find out.
We'll see.
So, we haven't talked to you since Mel King at 94, this iconic figure, needless to say, in this history. Most people know him first from this being the first Black Bostonian to be in a mayoral final, losing to Mayor Flynn, but most people think changing Boston along the way. Did you have a connection? Did you have a relationship at all with Mel King?
Well, I met him once. I was here, I left Boston in 86, I actually left Cambridge in 86, and then I was away for 25 years and I came back. But I knew of him probably in 83 when he was running for mayor. And
83, right?
Yeah, and I knew that he used to have breakfast and hold court at Charlie's on Columbus Ave.
Oh my God, that was a great place.
It is a great place.
They have wonderful pancakes.
Yeah, exactly. So I made the homage from a pilgrimage from Cambridge to there, just to be in his presence. I think I may have said hello, or even shake his hand or something like that, but that was about it. And I did that a couple of times. And since I've come back, I've gotten to know Mel and his wife Joyce and some of the kids a little bit, but I would say a little bit. So, but he is, he may be the most significant civic leader in this city in the 20th century. I think that's not an untrue statement. I think what happens is, we focus a lot on the mayoral race of '83, with which he lost, of course, to Ray Flynn, but the body of his work is prodigious. So he started out as a teacher, but he left teaching to really attend to what were then called, street gang activity. There's not a single aspect of Boston in which he's not been evolved. He is a community activist from his heart. That's to say that his business was activating communities and helping communities to use their agency. He was engaged in, as I said, street gangs, urban renewal, unemployment, anti-poverty organizer. He was head of the Urban League for a while.
Yeah.
And you'll remember famously in 1968, there was a plan to build a parking lot on the corner of Dartmouth and Columbus. And what did he do? He gathered about 100 to 400 people, and they set up tents there and camped out. And it became Tent City. And so they won. And then in 1988, when they actually built a space for people to live, because he was very much involved in and believed in affordable housing, I think that structure is referred to as Tent City. So he had his influence and in just about every aspect of the city. He created this community fellowship program at MIT, which brought leaders from around the country, maybe even the world, to talk about big ideas and how to create, economic democracy. He also taught as an adjunct professor at MIT, and I should also say proudly he was a poet. He was there was no part of the city that he did not touch. And I know we want to focus on the mayoral race, but which was important for a number of reasons. But he was really engaged in the city, in a city that he loved.
There are finally announcements, which I think the Boston Foundation may be involved in terms of tributes. You're nodding in agreement to him. On April 10th, I'm sure you'll see this online if you look. On April 10th, there'll be a public viewing from 4 to 8. At 6:30 that night, there'll be a speaking program with remarks and testimonies from community members affected by Mel King's life. A funeral service, that's at Union United Methodist Church in the South End. Funeral service the next day at noon, April 11th, and a Sunday brunch, April 16th at Florian Hall. Right. In South Boston, 2 to 5. 2 to 5, that's right.
So, a number of us have been working with Reverend Dr. Jay Williams at Union and the city to put together this program. So TBF has been involved. Maury Paris Jeffries from the Embrace has been involved.
Oh, great.
Carolyn Crockett, who's a close friend of the family, is involved. And the chapel, the church, the sanctuary holds only about 500 people. So we're going to have to figure out ways to accommodate those who won't be able to, fit into the.
That's small.
Florian Hall's obviously in Dorchester, by the way. My apologies a minute ago.
Yeah, they're trying to do some streaming or something like that.
Well, the church has actually it could set up a Zoom or a webinar for up to 1,000 people. So they may use something like that. There's also talk of having an overflow settings outside of the church. I looked at the weather. It's high 50s, but maybe rain. So we'll see how that works out.
One last thing about this. What we're really good at as a society, when someone has made contributions like Mel King did, is we're great at honoring them when they die. And not honoring them nearly enough. I know some did when they're living and working. One of the nice things that happened in the last year of his life is one of those plaques around Embrace Boston was dedicated to Mel King, which is important, I think. There should have been more, but it's important, and he was alive to see that. So.
And there's a wonderful mural of him, by the way, in the city, in, I think, Roxbury, maybe Manchester.
No, he, 94 years old. What a life he lived. We've been speaking
Lee Pelton,
with
we'll see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee Pelton.
Pleasure, thanks.
We've been speaking with Lee Pelton, President and CEO of the Boston Foundation. Thank you very much, Lee, for coming in, as always. Coming up, we're going to talk to the NAACP's Michael Curry about Trump and some other things involving Obamacare that are quite upsetting. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
You can make a huge impact at GBH by donating your old car, truck, or other used vehicle. Your vehicle donation is what drives our station and allows us to keep delivering the news and civic discourse that you rely on. As the snow melts and you start your spring cleaning, let us help you declutter by taking your old vehicle off your hands. Learn more about our vehicle donation program at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And Prince Lobel, a full-service law firm anchored in Boston, committed to working hand in hand to provide a wide range of services on matters of local, regional, national, and international reach. princelobel.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. And we're live at the library, streaming at YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. We are less than an hour away from the scheduled arraignment of the former president. And I have to say, before we introduce the next guest, we were talking earlier in the show about how it's important, if you're going to focus on this, is not to do another Trump-a-thon, but to focus on the charges, the arraignment, what happens out of that.
Well.
CNN, which is my station of choice, is doing one of those motorcade things from above, watching Trump's car, following Trump's car.
It's like O.J. Simpson,
It's
Three
really,
Ducks.
it is really.
And before that, we were just showing these endless pictures of Trump Tower.
No, it's really.
so
I'll tell
so
you,
we're doing what we're not
it's a
supposed to
mistake.
be doing, but what else is new?
And can I tell you what we're going to do the rest of the show? We're going to speak to Michael Curry in about 30 seconds, in part about today, the history of Trump arraignment and arrest. Then we're going to speak to former federal judge Nancy Gertner about it until 2. At 2 o'clock to 3, we will bring you information, not the hearing itself, because it's not televised, broadcast in any fashion. As soon as we have it, Ron Sullivan, an extraordinary lawyer at Harvard Law School, will join us to give us his 2 cents. But first, we're joined on Zoom by Michael Curry, a lawyer himself, by the way. He's the president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors. He chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing, Michael. They must have cleared, you probably can't see this, but they've cleared the road, obviously, because they're going at a good clip through New York City and no traffic on the road, Jim.
At least on his side, it's true.
At least on his side.
FDR Drive.
Michael, we'll just ask you, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us on the arraignment today of the former president? There is going to be no camera in the courtroom. There's going to be no audio in the courtroom. We're not going to see what goes on there. We'll have to wait till afterwards. But it is an unprecedented and historic, as we've all been saying. So what's your analysis or take on this?
Probably no surprise to either of you. I'm flooded with thoughts because I'm thinking about a lot of things. One, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, that today is the anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, April 4th, 1968. Right. So I'm thinking right now as I watched an interview with Yusef Salaam, one of the Central Park Five, or the exonerated five, and he did an interview about Donald Trump, and he said something interesting. He said, one, it was karma.
That was great. I saw his tweet. But go ahead.
Karma, as in 1989, Donald Trump put that ad in the paper calling for the death penalty within hours of their arrest. And justice didn't matter then.
No.
Due process didn't matter then. Our judicial process playing out and let's suspend our judgment didn't matter then. And then when they were found not guilty, he refused to apologize. Yeah. He refused to express any remorse for how he handled it. I find it interesting now that a former president who has very low rating with the Quinnipiac poll for being dishonest, like most people in America, even his supporters, know he's not an honest person. But yet they support him in this moment. I think the charges against him are the most minor among the many that are coming. When we think about the January 6th insurrection, the charges that he may have had involvement in some of the activities in the states to try to overturn the election, and then the other charges that are coming in states related to him. I think about something that Chief Justice John Marshall said in Marbury versus Madison, and it was the U.S. is a government of laws and not of men, which I think is telling, right? Right now, people are claiming that this is a politically motivated charge and potential prosecution. And I find that interesting because our process has always been political. We have many examples of political arrests and incarceration in this country, convictions in this country. However, a crime is a crime. And I think ultimately I'm looking forward to understanding what the charges are here and whether they rise to the level that we could see our first president in this country, as many presidents across the globe, Israel, Brazil, and other countries have been charged, and some of them are serving time or have served time.
Current head of Brazil did time for corruption, and he's now back as a populist president of that country. We're speaking to Michael Curry. You know, maybe we're obsessing on this today because we're going to talk to Judge Gertner about it. And we talked to the listeners about it. How do you feel about this judge deciding what Marjorie said early on? No cameras, no recorders, no radio broadcast. You bring 5 still photographers into the room until the arraignment starts and they have to leave. And other than that, you have your notebook. And one of our concerns, beyond the fact that it sort of flies in the face, at least to me, and I think Marjorie, of sort of public access to a public courtroom, is it also provides a greater opportunity for a serial liar to lie about what happened during his arraignment at his event tonight and in the future.
Well, I think if I were a judge in this case, and people can reflect back as you made the reference, Marjorie, earlier to O.J. Simpson, to the circus that was as we watched that case, right? And the fear that these deliberations, these proceedings, I should say, can turn into circuses. I think there is absolutely the case of that happening here, and a judge has to use his or her discretion to decide whether cameras in the room is an impediment to justice playing out like it should. So I think it's actually probably a wise decision. You know, all the world's a stage. I think it's a Shakespeare quote. And the reality is people will seize the opportunity to make everything in this proceeding a story and will spin it to their desire. So I think the judge is doing the right thing at this stage of limiting the access to the courtroom.
By the way, this proves that even Michael Curry can be wrong from time to time. By the way, before we continue, Maggie Haberman from the New York Times is saying Trump is traveling in a car alone with members of the Secret Service detail. His 2 lawyers, Todd Blanche and Susan, I can't pronounce her last name, Nikellas, are in a second car. His advisor, Jason Miller, is yet in a third.
Yeah, by the way, Maggie Haberman has covered the former president for years and years and years, back when he was just a real estate developer in New York City, and she was with the New York Post. She wrote the book Confidence Man. She has spoken about how this is really, no matter that it's not the most serious of the charges, this has really unnerved Trump because he's managed to slide away from all these previous cases, and this is the first time he's actually been indicted. But I wanted to ask you a quick question, Michael, about the media. We in the media have been criticized for paying too much attention. A lot of our listeners think we're paying too much attention to Donald Trump. NPR is not going to run live his speech or his remarks, whatever he's doing at 8 o'clock tonight, which we thought was a wise idea because the president lies a lot, or the former president lies a lot. What do you think of that? Do you think we should not be running these things, or how do you deal with that? A guy that gets up there and tells one big blooper after another.
It's so interesting. So you should know, Jim, my undergraduate degree is in journalism.
Oh,
we did not know that.
These sort of issues dominated my young career. I actually worked for a TV station. My first job in college was at Urban Update at Channel 7.
You're kidding?
I didn't know that.
No.
Alicia Hilliard, Rahima Ellis.
Yes.
I was out on the road and doing stories for Urban Update as a young kid.
Wow.
You have hidden your past, Michael Curry. We did not know that.
So I would say, no, I absolutely think, coverage of Trump is hard because for many of us across the country, I say me as a person of color, I do believe that was trauma, what we went through during the Trump presidency and even the campaign. I had to turn on TV because I had to respond and know the issues. But it disturbed me to listen to him. To hear him play the tropes and tug at the racist strings that he would play in his campaign. Most of my friends and many of my colleagues stopped watching the news during his presidency because it overwhelmed them, it depressed them. I would say literally, we're talking clinical depression, not just some passing depression, clinical depression. So I understand why, but I do think, bad things happen when we don't pay attention. And whether it's the KKK or neo-Nazis or a president who is unhinged and plays on fears and racism, we got to listen and watch because we got to know what he's saying and who's listening to him. Because I've said it on this show, those tens of thousands of people who follow him are teachers, lawyers, doctors, epidemiologists, they're reporters, which I think should terrify all of us.
By the way, it's not tens of thousands, it's tens of millions, which should terrify us even more. Yeah. By the way, he entered the building 2 minutes ago, and once you enter the building, the courthouse, you're considered under arrest. His arraignment is scheduled for 45 minutes from now.
Getting applause from the audience.
I think they're applauding because I'm back from Florida. They're really glad to have me here.
What I would say I'd like to see is I'd love to see him get fingerprinted in the photo, but they won't show us that either.
No, they're not. They have said no mugshot. No mugshot, no handcuffs. He will be fingerprinted, at least as of this morning, according to District Attorney Bragg's office.
You know,
and maybe one thing, Marjorie, Jim.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember, and it echoes in my ears, the lock her up chant.
Yeah.
Indeed.
With Hillary Clinton. It was unfair. It was mean. It was politically driven. And Democrats don't play like Republicans do, because we would be chanting in the street, lock him up. But we're not doing that.
No,
I think a few people are actually, Michael, right, you just said not chanting, but maybe there are a few people.
You know, can we put on your healthcare hat for just a second here, Michael Curry? This Texas judge decision about preventative care that was covered.
This is not getting much play. Do you think it's getting much play?
I think it's a huge,
It's huge.
big deal.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to me that here we've had Obamacare for I don't know how many years now, quite some time, and now some Texas judge can all of a sudden say the preventative care, parts of it anyway, that were covered under Obamacare are no longer
that are free
covered. So you're going to pay for these things, at least co-pays. So tell us about the impact of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's disastrous. I always try to give out homework whenever I say something these days. So I'm going to encourage your listeners to watch a PBS documentary called Obama's Deal. It's a frontline documentary about how all of that legislation was really pieced together with some politics, some maneuvering behind the scenes to get to the Affordable Care Act. So it's called Obama's Deal.
Thank you.
And what you're seeing is additional fraying at the edges of the Affordable Care Act. I'm embarrassed on behalf of the health plans that they would undermine one of the critical pieces of the Affordable Care Act, which meant that people would get preventive care, right? We should embed that in the system. And I've said this often, pay now or pay greater later.
Exactly.
If you do not invest in people living healthy and getting that preventive care, then we're going to pay for it anyway, because it'll come out in emergency room use, high hospitalization, chronic disease, public health investments. It's embarrassing that folks put business over health and over public health. And unfortunately, whether it's the American Association of Health Plans and others, they will continue to pursue this in the court. And quite frankly, the Biden administration should seek a stay on the ruling. They should appeal it, and unfortunately, I have no faith in the Supreme Court as it's currently constituted.
You know, too many people in this society, I think, generally don't care about things terribly much when they only affect poor people. I should make clear here, this court decision doesn't just affect preventive care if you're in the Obamacare marketplace.
No, it's
if you have private
yeah.
insurance, you were affected here too. So the breadth of this is just, it's huge. And it is
in
really
public opinion, 62% of the public recently saying it's very important that it stay in place. So we're not even listening to our people in what makes sense. We're starting to make business decisions that are not in the best interests of society.
You know, before you go, that just reminded me of something. Marjorie often says that the Supreme Court's record of making anti-majoritarian decisions on virtually everything, including potentially this that you just mentioned. Again, we don't have a Supreme Court case here. It's just a federal court judge. Does the NAACP have a position on court expansion, term limits, any of the issues that came out of the presidential commission that on the Supreme Court that people like Judge Gertner and Larry Tribe served on?
I think of course, the NAACP has been weighing in on the turning back of many of the gains. And one you didn't mention, Jim, is affirmative action and access to diversity in our school systems, which is on the docket and will be considered by the Supreme Court. We know that this is a rogue Supreme Court. I don't believe, at least recently, that we weighed in on the extending of the numbers of the members of the Supreme Court. But the strategy has to be, let's sit down and figure out how do we, with a Supreme Court that will be making these kind of rulings for decades, the impact, elections have consequences, decades. We really need to be looking at every opportunity to protect the rights of citizens, civil rights, And I think the board, I chair the Advocacy and Policy Committee. I'm on the legal committee. We've not taken a formal position on those things, but they'll be part of our discourse at our convention and our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, by the way, if I know anybody on the Advocacy and Policy Committee, can I have them put on the agenda having cameras in the courtroom? Can we get that before this committee?
I'll add it to the agenda.
I wish you would. Hey, Michael Curry, as always, thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Michael Curry, who's the president and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs, as Jim just pointed out, the board's advocacy, and policy committee. Coming up, we're going to talk to retired federal judge Nancy Gertner all about the impending charges for former President Trump, procedures in the courtroom for the arraignment, what she thinks about cameras in the courtroom. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming
It's the first criminal charge against a former U.S. president.
The Manhattan District Attorney handed down a criminal indictment against Trump last week.
He was investigated for covering up a payment to an adult film star.
What's in the indictment?
It remains under seal until Trump appears before the judge.
What are the implications?
One never knows where this will bounce, but I think we're in untested waters.
NPR will cover the proceedings and provide post-analysis. Join us tonight at 9 here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Swan Galleries with African American art at auction April 6th, featuring works by Norman Lewis and Beaufort Delaney, works carved and tooled on leather by Winfred Rembert, and contemporary artist Betty Saar. Info at swangalleries.com.
And the Hanover Theater, presenting The Moth Mainstage on April 13th, featuring true stories told live and without notes to honor the diversity and commonality of the human experience. Tickets at thehanovertheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie E. And we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News in 38 minutes, if all goes according to plan. And so far it has. There'll be an arraignment for the first time ever of a former president of the United States on criminal charges. When he entered that building, as I said, he is considered arrested under New York law. Joining us on Zoom to describe what she believes will happen at 2:15, to talk about our topic, which is the lack of cameras and radio transmission from the courtroom and other things, is Judge Nancy Gertner. She is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's great to talk to you.
Good to be here.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, Judge Gertner. So we know that the former president, is not going to be handcuffed. There's going to be no mugshot. We know he's going to be arraigned in the courtroom at 2:15. It's now 1:37, almost 1:38. What's he doing now? What's he going to do at 2:15? We don't know that much about this, but I figure you know more than we do.
Well, the procedure of every state is different. I mean, I would assume that there are sort of bureaucratic requirements, information that the authorities are getting from him. In his case, the whole purpose of a mugshot is so that you know what the person looks like. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we know what this person looks like. Yep. So there are things that they don't have to go through. Name, address, and all of that. It will be a sort of a ceremony that they're likely to go through because this is in terms of getting information, not mugshots. And they'll go through that because they're waiting around until 2:15. So do
they do height and weight?
They'll do height and weight, so he'll have to be honest about that.
Yeah, because that's controversial, how tall he was.
We had Dr. Ronnie Jackson, now Congressman Ronnie Jackson, his biggest supporter, Congressman from Texas. I hesitate to say this because Marjorie will say, oh, Jim did arraignments in that courthouse.
That's right. Here
When
we
I
go.
was a kid law student, third-year law student. I actually did arraignments in that courtroom. The average arraignment took about a minute and a half. Despite all the buildup, this isn't likely to take terribly much longer, is it, or is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. Especially in this case. I mean, it is a formal ceremony to announce the beginning of a criminal case, and there are things that are done on this occasion, but really don't have to be done with Trump. I mean, ordinarily it is reading the charges to the defendant or unsealing the transcript and summarizing the charges and giving the defendant an opportunity to read it himself. That's just the sort of formal beginning of a criminal prosecution. Then there'll be issues about whether to be released on bail. There will be no question that Trump will be returning to Mar-a-Lago this afternoon. No one thinks that he is a flight risk. So and then the other thing would be to go over what the schedule for discovery is. Discovery is when the government turns over its investigation, information in its investigation to the defense lawyer. So yeah, it won't be long. It won't be, frankly, the only significant issue will be the issue for the rest of us finding out what the charges are.
Yeah, will we find out?
It will be unsealed, at 2:15 when he is asked to enter his plea.
Even if they don't read the charges out one by one in the courtroom, the document will be available to the...
Right,
okay.
The document will be available at that moment.
Okay.
Judge Gertner, last week, I think it was, I asked you, I said I was embarrassed I didn't know your position on cameras in the courtroom, which matter a lot to me. And you told us that you have a little bit of involvement, having testified in favor before Congress when the whole judicial conference was on the other side of the table testifying against it. I have to say, I am stunned by this Judge Merchan's decision to allow nothing but still photographs. No computers, no phones for tweeting, no radio transmission, no TV cameras. And the argument I guess I would make that obviously he found totally unpersuasive. And by the way, the people who didn't want it public, the lead was taken by Trump's own lawyer, sort of ironic, the reality TV star, is one, the public interest is colossal and it is a public courtroom. Two, and this I think matters to me more, is it relevant for a judge to consider that the defendant in front of him, who is high profile, probably his most remarkable characteristic is being a serial liar? And without the public seeing or hearing what is said in that courtroom, even if it's a mundane arraignment, it gives him more ability to concoct a tale like he has done expertly. One, were you surprised the judge said no cameras and radio transmission? And would you have done the same in the same circumstance?
Well, apparently the default position in New York courts is no cameras.
Right.
The default position in Massachusetts was the opposite, right?
Right.
We have cameras in the courtroom. And what happens when you live with cameras, all of the tropes about what a camera will do to a courtroom dissolve. So, there were murder cases and rape cases and child abuse cases in state court that are much more interesting than most of the cases that come into federal court. And judges have figured out how an unobtrusive camera focused on a witness and not on the jury box, that the republic will not fall when we do that. If the default position in New York is no cameras, then it's a little hard to say for this judge that this is a case where there should be cameras. On the one hand, you're saying it's a case of monumental interest. True, this is a case of monumental interest. But the other side of the coin is if you've never had cameras in your courtroom, you're also afraid of things that actually I think don't happen when you get used to cameras, like people grandstanding and doing all of that. So I guess what I'm saying here is that I understand what this judge did because the default in New York is no cameras.
Can I ask another procedural thing? I was flying back last night from Florida. I was switching between CNN and MSNBC, and Lawrence O'Donnell had three hotshot lawyers on, all three of whom said without any equivocation, there's zero chance there'll be a gag order in this case, despite Trump threatening the prosecutor in a tweet at least, bad-mouthing the prosecutor and the prosecutor's wife it's not a tweet, a Truth Social posting, criticizing the judge. What they all said was the judge will say what the rules are in terms of how you have to behave about outside the courtroom, and then and only then, if Trump is to violate those rules, would he consider a gag order. Is that your analysis of what's likely to happen?
I went back over the Roger Stone case, if you remember. Now, the Roger Stone case was in federal court, and he was charged with a number of federal offenses. And the judge would describe in general the rule that you should not be doing anything that would undermine the fairness of a trial or the legitimacy of the proceeding. And then with every court appearance, it was clear that he was doing exactly that. And Judge Howell finally entered a gag order against Stone. Now, given the fact that Trump is a political candidate, a gag order will be even more fraught.
That's a good point.
My sense is that the judge will say, don't do X, Y, and Z. This is what the rules provide, and then see what happens to him. And see what happens.
Judge Gertner, I talked about this with you and Jared. Jim was down in Mar-a-Lago trying to see if he could see the president.
I wasn't in Mar-a-Lago. I was nearby, and I drove by Mar-a-Lago.
He drove by where he rear-ended the friend's the cars that he was driving, belonged to a friend, wasn't his own Tesla, But in any case, we talked about this when with you, me, and Jared about the charges here, and we don't know until the indictment is unsealed what exactly they are, but there's been a lot of reporting that he will be charged with multiple felony counts. Can you explain to people, as you did to us for us last week, how we go from a misdemeanor to a felony, and why paying hush money to an adult actress winds up being a felony in the course of an election?
So this is sort of a building block situation. Paying Stormy Daniels off was not illegal, period. Paying Stormy Daniels off with money from the Trump Organization, which you characterized as legal fees and not business expenses, well, you essentially characterized it, you lied about what the source of this and what it was about. That is illegal because records have to be accurate, but that would be a misdemeanor. What turns this into a felony, as we understand it, is that if the purpose of the hiding was to cover up a federal election violation, then it's a felony. And the federal election violation here would be, we wanted to cover this up because we didn't want anyone on the then the eve of a presidential election, we don't want anyone to know that he paid her off. And I said last week that I don't know what the evidence looks like in this case, but that has not been typically an easy link between a record, for the purpose of covering up an election violation. That has not been an easy argument for a couple of reasons. One is Michael Cohen pled guilty to something like this, but Michael Cohen pled guilty, so the issue was never tested. He just fell on the sword, never tested. John Edwards, the senator from North Carolina, I believe it was acquitted of a comparable offense, and the jury hung on 5 counts. And to some degree, again, broadly speaking, the defense there was, I didn't do this for my election. I did this to protect my wife, my sick wife. And he came very close to being acquitted of everything. So it's not, and then there is the legal argument, which is using the state law to enforce federal election requirements. That hasn't been tested before. And, my prediction here is that even if Bragg and these charges were the first out of the box, it's going to take years to litigate this. And although this will be the first, it will be tied up in all sorts of legal arguments for months and months and months and months to come.
Well, isn't the one possible exception to that, even though I assume it's unlikely, is because it is a novel legal theory that many smart lawyers, including those who can't stand Trump, think it's hanging by a thread. Isn't it at least possible that the judge could grant a motion to dismiss the case? I don't mean today, but in early motions?
He absolutely could. He absolutely could. There's no question about it. People have talked about, so that legal issue is, as I understand, is completely novel, and the judge could dismiss. Judges usually don't. Usually what happens is a judge will, my favorite expression is kick the can down the road, which is to say, trial will go forward, and if Trump is convicted, there'll be an appeal. Usually the judge doesn't do this in the first round, but who knows? That could well happen here. I
have one last question about this particular case, and then if we have a minute, we wanted to ask you about the Washington Post reporting on further evidence of possible obstruction of justice by the former president, in terms of the Mar-a-Lago documents down there. I don't know if you discussed this when you were on the other day. When I first saw the post from Trump with the head of Alvin Bragg on one side and Donald Trump with a baseball bat in his hands pointing at Bragg's head, I said, and I asked the Attorney General about this as in a hypothetical, and wisely she didn't answer my question. How is that not at least close to a criminal act on the part of Donald Trump in this case, or am I just inflating something that is just purely bad taste and crass?
Whenever speech is used in a criminal proceeding to say that the speech itself was incitement or the speech itself was a threat, that's not easy. That's not an easy haul, right? Because speech is protected in this country, and particularly, I mean, that's the way we saw the core of the January 6th prosecution. Was this really just about Trump inciting people? And then the question is, what's the relationship between his words? Because incitement to riot, right? Jim, you know this. This is how labor leaders in the 20s were generally, were put away, were prosecuted because of things they said that seemed to incite violence. So that's not an easy thing to do. January 6th investigation, we believe at least, there's more than just it's what Trump said in the days and weeks before January 6th. There's much more in terms of what he did. And when you cross over from what you say to what you did, you're in a territory in which could be the subject of a criminal indictment. But just, that picture taken down shortly, that's a hard nut to crack.
So even if it's a hard nut to crack and doesn't rise to the level of being criminal behavior, you were talking before about the judge in this case, Merchan, establishing rules of behavior for outside the courtroom, and only if they're violated by a party, including Donald Trump, would he consider some sort of a gag order or some sanction or that sort of thing. Is it likely that a judge would say, I would refrain from posting pictures, I don't mean this maybe I do mean it literally, of yourself with a baseball bat pointing at the prosecutor's head? I would refrain from saying the prosecutor's wife hates you and that's part of the motivation. I'd refrain from talking about death and destruction if there's an indictment, which there has been. Would he travel that road, or is it going to be much more general kind of admonitions?
An exhortation from a judge saying, I don't want you to do X, not an order, that's an exhortation which Trump can listen to. And it's sort of a shot across the bow, a warning. If you do X, I might enter a gag order. But, as I said, a gag order with respect to a defendant has First Amendment implications, has to be grounded in some real need for it, has to be grounded in some finding that there's a reason why you want to basically constrain the defendant. And it's made more complicated in this case by the fact that he's a political candidate.
That's a good point.
I just wanted to point out, we are not going to be able to see inside the courtroom, as we've said repeatedly, but there are cameras allowed in the hallways. So you're seeing several white-shirted New York State court officers standing outside the store, behind which we presume somewhere back there is where the former president is. We're also seeing 4 or 5 New York City police officers standing outside the store, and what looked like to me Secret Service guys with earpieces and those little metal medals. So there's a crowd of about, 20 people outside these doors where the president is behind. I wanted to ask you something.
Well, by the way, isn't the whole police force on call today?
The whole police force has been on call to be in uniform and ready, but there hasn't been this big protest, as we talked about before. Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up, and Congressman Santos showed up, but I guess he was shouted down by so many people that he got in the car and left. But in any case, I wanted to ask you, Judge Gertner, obviously the President of the United States is on a higher level of security and everybody knows him and importance and all that. But we've had some pretty notorious people in the federal courts here. Obviously, the Boston Marathon bomber, Johar Tsarnaev, Whitey Bulger, the Irish mob, so-called Irish mob leader from South Boston. Who decides those things? How you deal with Whitey Bulger getting from the Plymouth House Correction to Boston, and or Tsarnaev getting from, I don't remember where he was held, to the federal courthouse where he was tried. Does the judge do that? Do the court officers do that? Who does it?
And the court officer doesn't. On the federal side, it would be the federal marshals. The marshals would make arrangements, and with the case of Trump, the Secret Service would be involved because he's entitled to Secret Service protection as a former president. I don't know what the analog is in New York to the federal marshals, but I imagine it would be a coordinated effort with the New York City police that are, and with the Secret Service and whoever's in charge of court security in New York. But they would be orchestrating getting him from, his car to where he needs to go in the courthouse. There are all sorts of underground tunnels in the courthouse in New York. Yeah. But it's true. Downtown, Lower Manhattan has had numbers and numbers of not just the cases you're talking about that we had in Boston, but, cases of people who were alleged terrorists. Yep. And so they have managed to do all of that. In fact, that was one of the best arguments for why Guantanamo and its proceedings should be shut down, which is actually that the regular, ordinary proceedings in court have managed to deal with high-profile, serious charges of violent crime. Now, that's not going on in this case, but certainly the high-profile part is. But I think that they know how to deal with this.
We only have a minute left, and so my apologies so late. I mentioned the Washington Post says that Jack Smith, the special counsel, has even more evidence, documented evidence, videotapes, et cetera, that Trump obstructed justice. And in that story, they mention that under federal statute, intent needs to be proven, meaning doing it is not enough unless your intent was to obstruct justice. In our final 60 seconds, how high a bar is that for a prosecutor?
Well, if they have him going through the boxes, and if they have him going through the boxes after the stuff was subpoenaed,
Yes.
And he says to his lawyer, okay, here's what you should turn over, and he keeps other classified information, that's pretty close to hitting the bar. You remember the first couple of times we talked about this, you say, whoops, whoops. But this is not a whoops situation. Yeah.
That is a legal term of art. It is not a whoops situation from former federal judge.
Yeah, nor a blooper
Nancy
either.
Gertner. Judge Gertner, it's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Take care.
Thank you.
We've just been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, BPR contributor, and we much appreciate her time. She knows a lot about this stuff, Jim. She knows all this stuff, unlike people who are sort of part-time lawyers. Anyway.
Who are you talking about?
I wouldn't really know.
I thought you were going to say bad lawyers.
I would say thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. But this edition of Boston Public Radio is going to keep going. We're going to be back right after the news to whatever's going to happen in the courthouse. We're hoping to find that out before the end of the day. So stay tuned if you want. We're going to be back right after the news. Meanwhile, you can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by a great comic who's going to be at the City Winery. We'll get a kick out of her. NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan. We're going to talk to him about that terrible Obamacare decision about preventive health care. Harvard national security expert Juliette Kayyem. She can weigh in on all the security surrounding the president's appearance today. GBH's Jared Bowen and food policy analyst Corby Cummer. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to thank our BPL team here at the library, Angelica Marrero, Evelyn Brito, and Steve Baracci. Do you want to say anything,
I
Hugh?
do want to say something. Two things. One, we assume, even though we won't be able to bring you live coverage from the courtroom, that by the end of the next hour, we'll know exactly what the unsealed charges are against Donald Trump, and we'll be aided in that analysis by Ron Sullivan, who is the director of Harvard Law School's Criminal Justice Institute and former head of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. So Ron will join us. We hope you'll stick around. We'll be here till 3, bring you information on the arraignment the second it becomes available. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Jim and Marjorie are in your pocket or your purse. The GBH app lets you listen to what you want, when you want. It's GBH Radio on demand with the GBH app.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Comcast Business, offering internet solutions with Comcast Business Internet for your small business. Includes Comcast Business Security Edge and internet speeds up to 10 gigs. Comcast Business,